This novella is produced by Real Feelings brand. Novella title, Uncover the Veil, Stories of Sufism and Literature. Novella overview. In an unnamed Arab city, a novella unfolds the life of Muhammad, a short story writer. He draws inspiration from his mother, Muhammad, a kind-hearted widow deeply devoted to feminine Islamic Sufism and divine love. Her life becomes the foundation for his imaginative tales, captivating readers and transforming into a popular literary phenomenon. Chapter 1. The Development of the Novelist's Career. Muhammad was at work that morning, as every other morning for some time. He worked at a short story bookstore, where he was tasked with arranging books on the many shelves that stood in the store. He also had the responsibility of transferring books from the warehouse to the store, but he only did so when a specific story had sold out or when a new story needed to be added to the catalog. Today was no different. He was at work and was doing his duty, but then today had a touch of difference to it. While Muhammad was doing his job, he suddenly overheard the short story store owner, a 60-year-old merchant, complaining. He was talking to a short story writer about a problem. "Business has been slow for original short stories, you see. There's none captivating enough to make good sales," the store owner complained. The short story writer could sympathize with the old man and agreed with him. Muhammad, hearing this complaint, seized this as an opportunity. He was blessed with the skill of a creative mind, and he had grown up listening to beautiful stories from his lovely mother. He returns home at the end of the day without speaking to the 60-year-old store owner about the issue, but he had a plan in mind. A plan to help the man and the short story store. Muhammad lived with his kind mother, who had prepared a nice meal for him by the time he got back. That night was a busy one for Muhammad, who did not have any sleep but rather stayed up all night. He was filled with inspiration and had the pen in his hand. He put down several manuscripts and ideas for original short stories, stories that did not exist anywhere else, all fresh from his mind. The next morning, he was more active and jumpy than usual. He hurried to work without even having breakfast, very eager to show the 60-year-old store owner his manuscripts. He first did his work, not to appear as being nonchalant, arranging the stories in the bookshelf, and helped to open the store for the day. Then, while the store owner sat at his work post, Muhammad walked to him. "Good morning, sir," he greeted with a kind smile. "Muhammad, good morning. How can I help you?" the man asked. The 60-year-old man was almost always busy. He was always reading the stories that were sold or to be sold at his store, so he was always occupied. He raised his eyes from the book they were buried in and looked at Muhammad with a smile also. Muhammad was a hard-working employee, so the 60-year-old man took kindly to him. "I have something to show you, sir," he began as he pulled the manuscripts from his bag and showed the man. The 60-year-old man adjusted his glasses and took a good look at the manuscripts, reading through them carefully, while Muhammad just stood there in front of him, hoping for a positive review. The man finally smiled, and that was exactly what he needed. It was clear the man liked his manuscripts. Muhammad was more than excited to go to work the next day. The store owner likes his manuscripts and ideas for original short stories, and he was definitely going to capitalize on that. He was at work bright and early, and this time he approached the store owner immediately he saw him. "Good morning, sir," he greeted with a bright smile. "Good morning, Muhammad. How can I help you?" The 60-year-old man had fallen into Muhammad's plans with that question. It was his access to make the request that had been itching his thoughts all night, and even at that moment that he was standing there. Given my recent contribution to the progress of the store, I think it is only logical that I get a raise and a promotion to professional writer status," he said with a proud smirk. The 60-year-old man burst into uncontrollable laughter. He laughed so hard for so long that he almost fell off his seat. Muhammad was very confused. He wondered what was so funny to the man that he would laugh this hard. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked with genuine concern. The man's laughter began to die down little by little, but he was still chortling. "Oh, Muhammad, you're a funny boy. I'll give you that," the man said with a bright expression on his face. Muhammad did not see what was so funny about what he said, but he waited silently for the man to say something else. Then suddenly, the man's smile and chordal turned to a rather serious expression. Muhammad, I cannot promote you or even give you a raise. So you think because I like your ideas means you're qualified for a raise? Oh, my dear boy, the world is more complicated than that. We don't even know if your ideas will sell successfully. So instead of thinking about all that, go join the writers and help them develop stories from your manuscripts. Muhammad was very disappointed. But he obeyed either way. He went to the writer's room, where they were already reading his manuscripts, and they liked everything he put down. Using the manuscripts, the writers developed a good short story with the help of Muhammad. And when the 60-year-old store owner came to check in on the story, the writers could not keep shut about Muhammad's ingenuity. You have a great mind here, sir. One of the writers said to the 60-year-old man about Muhammad. He is so talented, another one added. The 60-year-old store owner could see Muhammad's worth through the words of the writers, and when he read the short story they had come up with using his manuscripts, he was wowed by it. He began rethinking his stand on not promoting Muhammad or even increasing his salary. Muhammad, walk with me, he called to him, and began walking out while Muhammad followed. Muhammad followed silently behind the man for some time before the man turned to him and asked, Do you think you can keep coming up with good ideas and manuscripts for original short stories? In response, Muhammad nodded his head confidently. Okay, the 60-year-old man took a deep breath. You have now been promoted to the writer's room, where you will wield the title Creator of Original Ideas, and you will have bonuses and incentives on top of your current salary, nothing consistent. God bless you, sir. Muhammad thanked the man soulfully, trying to hold back his screams of joy. Muhammad had been in the happiest of moods since he was promoted to the writer's room as the creator of original ideas. He had his break period at work, in which he decided to treat himself to some good minced meat with cheese sandwich from a food truck in the area. And after standing in line for almost 10 minutes, it was finally his turn. He got his meal and proceeded to walk around the neighborhood quietly while munching his food. There were a variety of stores around, and he admired them as he walked around, but then there was one that caught his eye, a printing press. He was amazed by this store. He had always desired to work at a printing press, drawn to the scent of industrial ink and fascinated by the technology capable of producing hundreds of thousands of prints swiftly. He enjoyed watching them work and wished he could too. Muhammad ate up his minced meat with cheese sandwich quickly and walked into the printing press. He saw one of the workers there and approached him with a smile, trying to inquire if there were any vacancies. The 60-year-old store owner, who was inside the printing press, spotted Muhammad talking with one of the workers at the entrance. He was shocked, wondering what he was doing there. The man snuck closer to where Muhammad and the man were talking, hiding behind some gigantic prints, not revealing himself. I assure you, I am willing to learn. I can apply right now if you would have me. Come on, boy. I've told you already, we don't have any vacancies. But if you speak to the manager directly, he might be able to work out something for you. He likes young men with fire to work like you. Could you put in a good word for me? I really need this job, Muhammad pleaded. The 60-year-old man sprang out from behind the huge print he was hiding behind and grabbed Muhammad by the hand before he could get startled and run away. See, sir, what are you doing here? Muhammad stammered, looking at his boss in shock. He is one of our top clients. The worker Muhammad had approached answered before he walked away. Muhammad could not believe it. Why here and why now? Muhammad, the 60-year-old man shouted his name. Is this what you do? Abandon your workplace in search of another? Do you have no sense of loyalty? Assalamu alaikum, sir, Muhammad stammered. Don't greet me with those sacred words when you were just about to abandon my store for another, Muhammad. The 60-year-old man was so not happy. He stammered, not knowing what to say. You should be at work, Muhammad. Yet here you are trying to get another job. Why? Didn't I promote you like you asked? What more do you want, Muhammad? The man scolded him. No, sir, it's not like that. Oh, really? What is it like then? The man frowned at Muhammad bitterly. Muhammad did not know what to say. He was terrified. But then the man's frown softened and he said, We're leaving. You're my staff, Muhammad, and no one is going to take you from me. Muhammad sat in a coffee shop, alone at his table, slowly sipping a cup of cappuccino and gently eating a small slice of chocolate cake on a plate. He ate and drank with such care that it looked like he was scared it would finish. But unlike Muhammad's table, the table opposite him was not as quiet and not as scanty. There were 7 men on the table eating also and talking very loudly that their voices could be heard from every corner of the coffee shop. They were clearly businessmen from their appearance, all dressed in suits, although some were better dressed than others. But more than that, it was mostly their conversation that gave away their line of work. I'm telling you, the demand for these stories is on the rise because they are forbidden, rare, and illegal. You know what they say? We all want what we can't have. One of the businessmen stated with strong resolve, "Yes, it's a good business to venture into. But, like you said, it's illegal." Another one tackled, "The ostentatious worth is in its illegality." The first one clapped back. "Okay, let's just say we were even a bit interested in investing in the trade of such forbidden stories. The question is, where do we get them?" Another mentioned. "Hear, hear." They all agreed with him. Muhammad, who had been listening in on their conversation, suddenly raised his hand and said, "I can write them." They all turned to him, and he got up from his chair and walked to their table, where he sat and looked at them with an unshakable confidence. "Who are you?" "My name is Muhammad, and I'm a writer. I can write you these forbidden stories for a stake, of course." He spoke with confidence because he did not want to give them the idea that he was naive. They were interested in what Muhammad had to say, and he was able to convince them to buy into his idea of capitalizing on forbidden stories which he would write for them. He told them of the story ideas he had, and they were very much interested. After Muhammad was done talking and they had asked him a few questions, the 7 businessmen began whispering amongst themselves, saying words to each other quietly and on the low. Muhammad was a bit surprised they could talk that low, given they had been talking at the top of their voices throughout the time they were there. They were being very cautious in their decision. Their major concern is the legal risk they would be taking if they went along with this business plan. Although there was one who wasn't afraid and was very vocal about his openness to start the project. After an hour of discussion, they agreed to start the project. Those who were still uncertain and had doubts would have a 25% share ownership in the new business venture, while 55% shares would be owned by the enthusiastic businessman who championed the idea. Muhammad, on the other hand, would take a 20% share ownership as the owner of the project. With the businessmen's connection, they were able to push the business to the black market, and it sold exponentially well. After an hour of discussion, they agreed to start the project. Those who were still uncertain and had doubts would have a 25% share ownership in the new business venture. With this new alliance, this business partnership, the project for Forbidden Stories began. The group met at the coffee shop for 1 hour every day. They discussed issues ranging from the development of the project's commercial strategy for marketing to the production steps to legal risk management. The coffee shop became their very own conference room, or a board of directors meeting room. Muhammad had come with a collection of original stories, and he was still creating more. They needed a good amount of stories for their project to work, and now they were debating on the amount of money that will be needed to take the job off the ground. "Our budget should be able to cover us in the span of 10 years, a fixed amount a year. So what are we looking at?" The chairman of the board, the businessman with 55% shares, asked. "I propose the sum of $400,000. One of them echoed. "Do you think that will be enough? We're looking at 10 years here. That'll be $40,000 a year. Will $40,000 a year be able to make this happen the way it should happen?" The board chairman asked with dissatisfaction. "What do you propose then?" "I suggest we elevate the budget to $1 million. He echoed, and everyone looked at him in shock. "That should suffice. $100,000 each year for the next 10 years. There were murmurs and whispers amongst the other businessmen. Muhammad just sat quietly until one of them asked him, "Muhammad, What say you? Do you agree that we need that much for the project to become saleable? Muhammad cleared his throat first. Ahem. Production is as big a deal as advertising and marketing, and each of them will require a good amount of investment to make their profit and progress visible. Uh-huh. A number of them echoed, awaiting his words. So we'll need an equal budget for both production and marketing. Equal, but sufficient. And $100,000 a year split in two, $50,000 for production and $50,000 for marketing and advertising, seems more than enough. They all pondered on his words and began nodding their heads in agreement. They agreed with him unanimously. The businessmen took Muhammad's words seriously, and it was no surprise to the board chairman that they asked for his opinion and listened to him. They had now agreed on the 10-year budget, and the project was going to progress now. Muhammad had great ideas and was a natural at coining the perfect storylines and developing plots, as well as putting down fully fleshed stories that were nothing short of outstanding. He truly had a gift. This made him an invaluable member of the board, the brain and skill behind the product of the company. But the board needed him to become well-learned and expand what he knew of the world and of writing. He needed to groom his talents, hone his skills to become a competent professional. So, at the request of the board members, he enrolled in a creative writing class. He didn't want to go to a university or any tertiary institute, as that would take too long. Instead, he got into a special creative writing class, which taught a bulky curriculum, helping him get a lot of information and knowledge as quickly as possible. The class was attended by a number of students who fancied writing stories, although they were mostly hobbyists, people who wrote for fun, or as a creative extension of themselves. Very few of them saw writing as a means to make money, and barely any of them were like Muhammad, who wrote because he was good at it, and he loved it, and also to make money from it. During the first class, Muhammad was seated early, waiting for the teacher to come in. He had everything he needed and was nervously tapping his pen on his desk when suddenly a man in his late 50s walked in wearing a gray-fitted suit with one book in his hand. "Hello, everyone," he echoed loudly for the entire class to hear as he took a stand in front of the whole class. "Hello, sir." Most of the class echoed back. "My name is Akraf Amr, and I will be your tutor throughout this course of this creative writing journey." The man introduced himself. "He's an absolute legend." Muhammad could hear some students whispering from behind him. "I hear he was nominated for a Pulitzer." Muhammad knew who Akraf Amr was, and that was exactly why he picked the man as his teacher, a legendary veteran author who was an idol and inspiration to him. "Let us begin." He spoke with a commanding voice as he took a chalk and scribbled the words, "creative thinking," on the board. As a writer, be it an amateur or a veteran, one must be able to think creatively and deeply, to see things in a different light, to see things in a way others don't. "Think out of the box," a student added. A common saying, which is usually correct, but for this, it isn't the correct expression, because with creative thinking you can see that box as a paper kite or a toy storage or even a placard for a protest. With creative thinking, you play God, and that is what being a novel writer is. You know everything, you are everywhere, you can do anything. The characters are your creations, and you can do with them as you please, yet you must do right by them. So you need to be able to come up with fresh ideas, brainstorm good ideas, and see how to apply them. You need to be inspired regularly. Muhammad was spellbound from the very first sentence the man uttered, and that's how it was from that day. Muhammad took Professor Akraf as a mentor and developed himself. Muhammad was a fervent student at Professor Akraf's classes. He dared not miss any, and he quickly became an interest to the professor himself. During one of his many classes, Professor Akraf was teaching on strategic planning for novel writing, and it was a conversational class. Students had different views on how best to start and plan a novel, and the professor was explaining how they should go about writing a novel and why. "But what if I don't have the complete idea for a novel? Can't I just begin and see where it takes me?" Muhammad raised his hand and asked. "Don't get me wrong, Muhammad, you can do that. As a matter of fact, many a great novels were written that way. But let me ask you something. Have you ever written a novel? And I mean a complete bulk novel." No, sir, Muhammad answered. Well, I have. And let me tell you what happens when you do that, when you start a novel with a half-baked idea. You get stuck on the way, you don't know what next, and you become desperate for inspiration. It is what you all know as writer's block. Everyone in the class echoed. Exactly. So it's always better you research, analyze, and compile your story and the ideas that form its foundation. Personally, I recommend planning chapter by chapter, penning down what each will hold. That is the perfect engineering mechanism. You do that, and you won't see yourself hanging on the way. The students seemed to be taken by the professor's words, so he solidified on planning a novel and novel engineering before he moved on to story structuring and novel advertisement. But isn't the work supposed to speak for itself? One student asked when the professor mentioned that writers would have to advertise their books. The professor let out a low chuckle and said, "Unlike what you might think, a book can be a literary masterpiece and still be a commercial flunk. So yes, while you give your best as a writer, you also have to become an advertiser and marketer for your book if you wish it to sell, which is why things like book readings and tours and positive reviews in newspapers and magazines from established critics and writers exist, all to ensure the success of the book." The class soon came to an end, and the professor was packing his bag when Muhammad approached his table with the words, "Great class today, sir." "You think so?" the professor asked with a humble smile. "Of course, I learned a lot." "Well, I'm glad you did, Muhammad. So what can I do for you?" It might be too much to ask, but I have a manuscript, and I was hoping you would take a look at it for me and give me an honest review." "Really? Of course, give it here." The professor was excited to read a student's manuscript. Muhammad was very happy with the professor's acceptance of him and enthusiastically pulled out the manuscript from his bag. It was a sizable document. He handed it to the professor and said, "It's a new literary genre I created." "Really? What's the name of the genre?" "It's called maternal literature." "Maternal literature. I like it. I'll give it a good read. I am very excited for this." "I hope it isn't too disappointing for you." "Did you give your best?" "I did." "Good. Then I won't be disappointed." 4 years passed, and the genre which Muhammad pioneered, maternal literature, was now a popular phenomenon in his city. Some would even call it a best-selling genre. Chapter 2, a brief biography of his life. I'm going to give birth," the 20-year-old girl Sumaya cried out, suffering from prenatal labor. They rushed her through the hospital corridors, taking her to the maternity room for delivery. In a tired voice, she addressed the nurse guiding her. "May God give you strength. Please take my phone and call my husband. He's at work right now. I'm about to call him. The number is saved." "It's under Khalid's name." The nurse silently received the phone from Sumaya, who hadn't spoken a word until then. The veiled nurse, likely a recent graduate from the College of Nursing, exuded quietness and a natural devoutness common in this conservative society. The nurse didn't hesitate to call Sumaya's husband Khalid. However, in different circumstances, her religious beliefs, which involve restrictions on talking to men, might have caused her to hesitate or even decline. Moments later, Khalid answered, and the nurse began, "Hello, Mr. Khalid, this is the nurse." Flustered, the nurse avoided mentioning her name and continued, "From the hospital. Your wife, Sumaya, is going into labor and needs you here right away." The husband, surprised and overjoyed, shot up from his chair. "I'm on my way." Elated, Mr. Khalid, 31, barged into his manager's office. "Sir, I'm having a son today. Today, may I leave work early with your permission?" The manager, suppressing a proud smile, chuckled. "Don't worry about it, Khalid. You're a dedicated worker and a true gentleman. Go be with your family. I'll keep you in my thoughts." Khalid exited the office swiftly, jumped into his 1990s model Caprice, and raced towards the hospital. While speeding down the road, Khalid encountered a slow-moving car. He reduced his speed, but the car behind him blared its horn repeatedly, urging him to speed up. Instead of being influenced, Khalid maintained his reduced pace, observing the driver in front of him gradually slow down further. As the opportunity arose at a side crossing, Khalid safely overtook the slow car. He then noticed an elderly gentleman behind the wheel, with all the windows down. Suddenly, the old man frowned at Khalid. "You fool, reckless youth," he muttered. May God curse those who taught you how to drive." Khalid paid no attention to the old man's words, accustomed to such behavior in his city's traffic, where it had become a societal norm. He glanced ahead at the green traffic light and, eager to beat the red, slammed on the accelerator. "Come on, hurry up," he urged his car, stamping his foot with frustration. Unfortunately, the light turned red long before he reached the intersection. He slammed on the brakes, screeching to a halt, tires smoking and leaving a long black mark on the asphalt. Stuck at the light, he cursed his bad luck. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Khalid's wife Sumaya was in the throes of labor. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out in pain, strands of her hair escaping her covering, in a society that disapproved of such exposure. A nurse offered comfort. "Don't worry, Sumaya. The doctor will be here soon, and you'll welcome a beautiful baby boy or girl." At that moment, the husband waited at the green light, listening to the car radio. The song played, "One night, if there's another night in my life, I need her. Tonight is the night of my life," as sung by Abdelrab Idris. The car's interior featured aging red cotton and silk sofas, dusty and lacking a functioning air conditioner. The windows were rolled down. Eager to meet his firstborn, Khalid Poetry Ibn al-Farid murmured, "And if my love for you is excessive and serious, then my sins have increased." The green light turned on. Khalid, driven by his excitement to become a father, practically flew through the intersection. Suddenly, a large car sped through a red light from the opposite direction, colliding with Khalid's vehicle in a horrific accident. It was as if two meteors had collided in the vast expanse of the night sky. Dazed and confused, Khalid lay between reality and a dream, unaware of the tragedy unfolding. Back at the hospital, Sumaya was giving birth. As her husband took his last breath, his son entered the world, a new life blossoming amid the unfolding tragedy. Mother was very loving and caring. Mother was very partial to her only child, especially given the fact that he was all Mother had. She fed her son breast milk until he was nearing 5 years of age. Her son had other meals, but breast milk was his main source of sustenance. It was also his preferred edible. And Mother was more than gracious. The mother would do anything for her son. As he got older, growing from 6 years to 8 years, he folded into himself, staying away from the outside world. He remained locked in his mother's apartment all day, every day, entertaining himself with movies. He developed a deep love for them because he was able to see the world through them. He could see places he had never been, see people of different backgrounds and cultures and upbringing. Movies were his way of seeing the world. Soon enough, as he approached his early teenage age, he discovered another way to see the world. Books. He found a whole different world on the pages of novels and short stories and even comic books, ranging from several genres and authors. He fell in love with stories and reading. One could even say that books were his first love. They were what got him through his early teenage years and provided him with the vision which he used to look at the world. Between the ages of 15 and 18, Muhammad began writing flash fiction, very short stories, which were a product of his overactive creative mind. He would get inspiration from the tiniest of things as tiny as a word. He could think up an entire short story just from a single new word he learnt. And at the age of 19, Muhammad set out to reach out for his dream and make money as an adult he now was. So he applied to work at the closest thing he could find to writing, which was a job at a short story store.
Chapter 3. A collection of very short stories about his mother. Necessary existence is breastfeeding shadow existence. Muhammad's apartment was a humble one which had no guest room. So whenever Muhammad's friends came over, they would have to sit in the living room. And that particular day, 3 of Muhammad's friends were over, sitting in the living room with Muhammad on one long couch when mother came in with a child in her arms. It was her neighbor's child. She was modestly dressed in a safsari and a long cotton dress. "Assalamu alaikum." They all echoed respectfully once they saw her entering the room. "Walaikum assalam." She answered with the softest smile as she made her way to the carpet in front of them and sat down there with her neighbor's child in her arms. Some strands of her hair had escaped her safsari without her notice. She still wore her beautiful smile as she stroked the child's cheeks softly. She welcomed her son's friends with an open heart. Had my son offered you anything to drink? Muhammad asked her son's friends warmly. Yes, but we had to force him to do it. He says we're no longer visitors. One of Muhammad's friends joked. Muhammad chuckled softly and said, well, technically, you all are family. You've been friends with my son for a good amount of time now, and you come around often. So yes, you are part of us now. She spoke with such a heartfelt tone as she swayed the child in her arms gently. Too bad, Muhammad doesn't see us that way. Another friend commented and they all laughed. Don't worry. Whenever you all come by and my son doesn't want to attend to you, I will. Muhammad continued to joke with them with kind, respectful and modest words which brought joy to their hearts. Really? One of them asked so happily. Of course. I'll even cook my dish, which you all love so much. She did all this while being mindful of the child in her arms, carefully moving herself side to side like a rocking chair, trying to keep the child calm. Wow. You are a wonderful mother, Muhammad. I don't think even Muhammad knows how special you are. One of them flattered her with a joyful heart. He does. He knows I will do anything for him, she said with a humble smile, and she did this while also stroking the child's cheeks. The child tried to hold her finger several times and suck it, but she would always playfully move her hand away, so the child wouldn't catch it. I mean, if we weren't family and didn't know any better, we would have thought your neighbor's child was yours. I mean, just look at how much care and love you are showing to the child. Another friend added, you are a truly caring and passionate woman. You could love a dying seed back to life. I am flattered. But all love comes from Allah. I just share the love He has given us. She answered with a humble smile. We are, after all, children of Allah. The gentle mother spoke the highest level of feminine gentility. Perhaps, you are Allah's favorite. One of Muhammad's friends joked, and they all laughed. I mean, how many neighbors do you know are comfortable enough to leave their child with a neighbor? I'm sure, a lot. Muhammad answered with her head lowered in humility. I assure you that it's not a lot. You are special. It is because of how you can care for a child so uniquely in a way that not many women or even mothers could. I wish my wife would be like you. Another said. Thank you all for your kind words. She smiled. I'm sure your wives will be prettier and better than me. They all laughed. While Muhammad joked and talked and laughed with her son and his friends, the innocent little child she held in her arms sneakily raised his tiny fingers towards Muhammad's neck, which carried a beautiful shining necklace. He was curiously obsessed with the necklace, trying time and time again to possess it for himself by forcefully pulling it off her neck. But Muhammad, being so ever gentle and calm, played with him with a soft laughter full of warmth and tenderness. But even with all her playfulness and smiling and laughing, the child did not give up. He was not discouraged from his goal. Instead, he was ever more enthusiastic to get the necklace. And with the swiftness of a flashing light, he grabbed the necklace and began pulling it forcefully. No, my dear, don't pull the necklace. You might cut it if you keep doing that. She admonished the child and explained, not that he could understand her. He just kept yanking and pulling the necklace. To discourage the child from pulling and possibly eventually cutting the necklace, Muhammad took off the necklace from her neck and hid it. But all that did was make the child shift his focus to something else. He placed his hand on Muhammad's breast through her clothes, which indicated that he wanted to be breastfed. This made mother's face turn red in embarrassment. The child was just a child who did not know or notice anything other than what he wanted, suddenly began crying aloud for Muhammad to feed him when she was delaying. Hush now, baby, she caressed him and patted him, hoping to make him go quiet, but he clearly was not stopping. The only way that child would stop was if he got what he wanted, and Muhammad knew this. Okay. Don't cry anymore, she pleaded as she surrendered to the child. She carefully placed the child on her lap and used both her hands to open 2 of the upper buttons of her cotton dress. Then she slowly put her hand under the cotton shield and reached in for one breast and slowly pulled it out. Muhammad's friends, who had been talking to Muhammad since mother became occupied with the child, sharply caught the sight of mother's big white breast from the side of their eyes. Their focus began to shift, paying more attention to her breast, taking note of the brown nipple on top of it like a cherry on top of a cake. This sight made Muhammad's friends aroused, and Muhammad could see them biting and licking their lips. Some of them were even biting their fingers. Their lust was so obvious, it was almost visible. All of it became worse when she innocently put her breast into the child's mouth to breastfeed the child, and he began sucking her. Muhammad's friends became lost in the sight. They had made a very innocent sight become very sexual. And Muhammad never intended to make them feel this way, neither did she know they felt this way as they looked at her, but Muhammad knew, and this made him jealous. Muhammad's breast was bare because she was feeding the hungry child in her arms. Muhammad's friends, who had noticed how her soft breast shook every time she laughed, made it their mission to make her laugh a lot more. Remember when you saw people climbing into Muhammad's room through the window, and you screamed because you thought it was thieves? When actually it was we and Muhammad coming back late. One of Muhammad's friends reminisced aloud. Ha ha ha, she laughed uncontrollably. I remember that day clearly. I almost whip you all with a long broom. Indeed. Allah saved us from your holy fury. Another one commented. Fury. She continued laughing. I didn't know I had any fury. It is the fury of a good mother who cares for her son. Like when you heard a teacher flogged Muhammad mercilessly in school when he was a child. Ha ha. I remember that. She laughed again, and her breast juggled while in the child's mouth. I was so angry that I shouted at the teacher. And the teacher could not even say a word. The child suddenly smiled brightly, and at seeing this, one of them saw this as the perfect opportunity. Oh, Muhammad. The child is happy, he said as he approached her and softly pinched the child's cheeks. He's happy because he is eating. In the same way, you are all happy whenever you are having a delicious meal. She explained innocently. Really? So you mean that, to this child, he's having a very delicious meal? Another of Muhammad's friends asked as he also approached her. Yeah. The best of meals. To a child, the breast is the everything and anything he will need. Well, now you're just being modest, Muhammad. I'm sure your breasts are different from others. Another friend added as he walked to her. Soon they were all around her, save for Muhammad, who stayed on the couch. Well, every woman's breast is signature to her. That is the way Allah created us all to be unique. It's like the way we all have legs, but all our legs are different, they are specific to us. Really? They all echoed. They were actually curious, but they were also very much aroused by her breast. The child had now slept off, so Muhammad placed the child on the mat beside her. Yes, really. Take me for example. I have big nipples. She explained while pointing at the nipple of her bare big breast. She did this without any intent of sexually arousing them, but instead to educate. But of course, they did not get the memo. The sight of this big breast with a big pink nipple on it was a strong turn-on for them. And for some people, their breasts are softer than others. Wow! They said in unison. Can we touch it to see how soft yours is? One of them asked. Of course. She answered, completely oblivious to their real intent for wanting to feel her breast. She felt she was just teaching them. They all looked at each other, completely enthralled by what was about to happen. They could see in each other's eyes the urge to grab her breast, but they knew they wanted to be civil and not raise any suspicion. So the person who asked gently reached out and held her breast. Oh my, it's so big my hand can barely hold it. And it is so soft. Wow! He said as he squeezed the breast carefully. Let me try. Another said, and the person holding it let go for him. They all took turns holding and squeezing her breast. She even pulled out the second breast for them so they could feel both. What does breast milk taste like? One of the friends threw the question. I don't really know how to explain it. It doesn't taste like the normal milk you buy from the store, so that will not be a good example. Would you like to taste it? The boys were shocked by this. They were more than happy to. They all echoed words of confirmation and affirmation. Okay, now. One by one. She said to them. The boys took turns sucking Muhammad's breast. It was a joyful day for them. Mother Teresa of Arabia. Muhammad was on the way back to her apartment. She was wearing an abaya and niqab and there was nothing exposed but her eyes. She was humming a song quietly when she noticed something, or rather, someone. She saw a homeless man lying on the side of the road. He was in what used to be a trouser which was now torn to become a long short, plus it had holes in it and looked very dirty. He wore a dirty, worn-out t-shirt and had patches in different areas. The man folded himself on a little mat and was shivering. It was windy and had begun raining. Muhammad looked up, and the rain was just becoming heavier, and she had pity on the man. She thought to herself, will he sleep under the rain? He would fall sick. The rain was still getting heavier, so she decided to help the homeless man. The city had flooded several times in the past, and the thought of the homeless man being carried away by the flood in his sleep was frightening to Muhammad. She rushed to the man and bent down to be closer to him as she spoke. She tapped him and called aloud, "Hey, sir." The man opened his eyes and saw her looking at him. He sat up and asked, "What do you want? You can't stay here. You're already shivering, and the rain keeps getting stronger." "Huh?" The man was confused at her concern. "Come with me to my house. My son will take care of you. He'll fix you a hot bath and some fresh clothes. You can stay with us and get better." The homeless man was hesitant. He didn't know the woman who was so concerned about his well-being, and this was strange to him. But as the rain got heavier, making them wet, he looked at her with a convinced heart. "You wouldn't want to get more sick, would you? Please, come with me. I promise that you'll be safe with us." What Muhammad was saying made sense to the homeless man. He nodded his head in agreement and said, "Okay." Muhammad smiled at him so gorgeously and stood up. She extended her hand which he held, and she pulled him up. "Okay, let us go," she said, leading the way as they walked to her apartment. Several days passed since Muhammad took in the homeless man. She had nursed him back to good health and clothed him with more decent clothes. He was definitely not looking like his old self. She had helped cut his bushy and dirty hair, trimmed his beards and even washed it. She made sure he had a hot bath every morning and night to keep him clean and also in good health. And through all these days, Muhammad was becoming more relaxed and free with the man around, not purposely though. She had just gotten accustomed to him. At first, she was always dressed as she always did in public, covering every part of her body except her eyes but in less sophisticated outfits. But then, as time went by, she began uncovering her face in front of the homeless man, letting him see her beautiful face. Slowly, she began exposing the forefront of her hair through the hijab. She would pull it back halfway from time to time, but soon enough she began taking off the niqab entirely. As the days went by, Muhammad began showcasing her charms even without knowing. Since she no longer wore a niqab, the homeless man could now see her beauty, but that was not all. Now she began leaving her legs exposed, letting the man capture the sight of her gorgeous legs. And as though that was not enough, she let her shoulders show soon enough and ultimately, her cleavage. She did all this without realizing how much she had been exposed to this strange man. She had become so accustomed to having him around that he was basically like family all of a sudden, and she didn't need to always have her guard up when he was around. It had been 2 weeks since the homeless man started living in the apartment with the mother and son. Muhammad and the homeless man sat on a long couch one afternoon, while Muhammad sat on the smaller couch opposite them. Muhammad's gaze was planted on his mother and the homeless man. The homeless man was hugging her on the couch while they sat a day. The man did not mind that Muhammad was there staring at them. He held on tight to Muhammad. Muhammad was not wearing her hijab, so her hair was uncovered. After hugging her passionately for some time, the homeless man traced his fingers to her lips and began playing with it. He caressed her beautiful lips, taking time to admire their softness and its pattern. Muhammad did not take his eyes off of them. He watched carefully as the homeless man ran his fingers on his mother's lips. It was like he wanted to kiss her. There was a thirst in his eyes that could only be quenched by Muhammad. So, he began fiddling with the gold necklace on her neck while holding her waist with his left hand. His eyes could not escape her cleavage popping up from her cotton dress. So he moved his hand to her cleavage, playing with the top of her breasts. Then he gently moved his hand down and began squeezing her breast so hungrily in front of Muhammad, who was proud of his caring mother tending to the needs of the homeless man. After pressing her breast briefly, he gently moved his hands down and lifted Muhammad's cotton gown, a bit of a stretch as she was sitting, but he managed, revealing her plain blue underwear. The man carefully pulled down her underwear while also getting off the chair and going down on his knees himself so he could properly take it off. Muhammad raised her legs so he could take off her underwear completely. The man then kissed his way up her legs and then kissed her foreskin. This made Muhammad moan softly. The man kissed his way up to her breast and then planted kisses on her neck while his fingers traveled to Muhammad's vagina. He began fingering her so passionately while playing with her clitoris that Muhammad trembled in pleasure. She trembled out of bliss and held onto the man, hugging him so tightly as he fingered her with such quickness. Muhammad, who had been watching his mother being finger-fucked from the couch opposite them, was so happy for her. He had not seen her so happy or enjoyed so much pleasure ever in his life, and was happy she was experiencing it now. "Oh my God." Muhammad's lips released those words as she held the man tight while he fingered her. And the more she moaned, the faster and harder he fingered her. She then caught the smiling gaze of Son and with an out-of-breath voice, she said, "Son, you are your mother's boy. I am thankful for you." She began fidgeting and twitching, with her eyes rolling uncontrollably. "Oh fuck me," she whispered strongly into the man's ear. It was like a surge of electricity had been pumped into her body and she was trying hard to not let it overwhelm her, but it was not working. The homeless man kept fucking her with his finger non-stop. Her body, which had been moving in symphony with the passion that flowed, suddenly tightened up as she began to shake and vibrate until she then released, "Oh yes. Oh yes." She dragged her words. She had reached orgasm and come so hard from the man fingering her sweetly. Mother Trap and her precious stone. Muhammad walked on the street one afternoon wearing a black abaya which didn't help with the blaring heat. She was looking for someone but did not know where to find them, so she was just taking a walk through the street hoping to be able to figure out the place she was looking for. But when she was not seeing any success in her search, she stopped a passerby on the road. "Good afternoon, sir." "Assalamu alaikum." "Wa alaikum salam." The man she greeted so respectfully answered, "I am looking for someone. I was wondering if you could help me." "If I can, I will." The man answered politely to her, "I am looking for the house of an old Islamic philosopher and cleric. He is very popular around these parts." "Oh yes, I know his house." The man answered, his face brightened by the fact that he actually could help her. But Muhammad smiled even brighter as she said the words, "Could you please direct me to him?" "Don't worry. I'll take you there instead," the kind man offered. "Wow. Thank you so much, sir." She put her hands together to show appreciation. The kind man showed her to the Islamic philosopher's house and left after she thanked him heartily. She looked at the house, which was old and dilapidated. It had markings and symbols of Sufi artworks. Anyone who walked by the house would have no doubt in their mind that this house was in fact that of a Sufi practitioner. The entrance door of the house was open, and she didn't know if she was to just enter the house or knock. So she stood there deliberating, and after some time, she knocked on the door softly, but there was no response. "Hello," she called, but there was still no response. So she decided to take a bold move and go in. She then took a deep breath and announced her entrance, "I am coming in," before she walked into the house. Inside the house of the philosopher was nicely decorated but nothing ostentatious. It has mystical musical instruments about the place, but the most important thing that caught her eye was the philosopher himself in his prayer room. He was wearing a long white dress with a white turban on his head, but he was no paying attention to the stranger who had just entered his house. Rather, he stayed focused on what he was doing before she came in. He was praying. She heard him chanting Subhanallah several times while facing the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. So in respect of his supplication to Allah, she kept quiet and waited for him to finish his prayer before she could say anything else. She did not want to distract him. Muhammad watched the Islamic philosopher pray and bow in supplication to Allah in his prayer room. She stood just by the open door for some seconds before she decided to go in. She quietly took off her shoes so as not to distract the philosopher. Muhammad then carefully walked into the prayer room, making sure not to make a single sound. She was as quiet as a snail, except she was faster. The Islamic philosopher was now rounding up his prayers and supplications. Muhammad, who had been very careful and quiet in her entrance of the prayer room, had taken a seat beside him and waited for him. The Islamic philosopher soon finished his prayers and supplications, then he turned to Muhammad with a humble smile. "Assalamu alaikum." She greeted with a little bow. "Wa alaikum salam." The Islamic philosopher answered with a bright smile. "What brings you by?" "I am conflicted, sir." She began. "Conflicted? How so?" "Bare your soul, there is no judgment here. We must submit to the will of Allah, but how do we know what Allah's will is? Because He shows us the way. Because His way is good and is devoid of evil and contempt. We are not just a religion, but a lifestyle. So in our everyday lives, when we choose to do what is right instead of wrong, that is Allah's will. I am thankful for your wisdom. Also, I have always been a satisfied woman, but as of late, I catch myself wanting more. I am scared I'm going out of the will of Allah, and out of the Sufi way. The Islamic philosopher took a deep breath before he started. Firstly, you need to remind yourself of the values of being Sufi. Then you have to ask yourself if your desires go against these values. I don't know. I try, but the lines feel more blurry nowadays. The Islamic philosopher was very humble, kind, and accommodating. He smiled and said to her, "Okay, let us try this. I will ask you questions, and you'll answer them honestly, okay?" "Okay, sir." She nodded. "Do you pray every day and read the Quran every day?" He spoke softly. "Yes, sir." "Do you love Allah?" "Yes, I do." "Then all you have to do is to stay true to the values of Sufi and cast out whatever is inspiring doubt in your mind. Now, let us go through the values together." "Okay. Okay, sir." "We have unity with Allah, humility, love and compassion for both Allah and all living things, detachment from materialism, inner journey." As the Islamic philosopher took his time kindly re-educating Muhammad on the values of Sufism, helping her align her thoughts with the values, she began feeling elevated, lighter and relieved. She nodded her head in understanding of the Islamic philosopher's words. "I appreciate you taking the time to speak these reassuring wise words to me. I already feel anew. I am glad I could help." The Islamic philosopher answered with a kind smile. Muhammad and the Islamic philosopher had now shifted from the discussion about faith and religion. The Islamic philosopher was also a specialist in precious stones, and Muhammad had some inquiries to make. "I hear you are also an expert on precious stones, sir," she stated. "You could say that." The man answered with outstanding humility. "I was intrigued with them from an early age. I found it unique that a stone of the earth could be awarded so much value for so long. Indeed. I understand what you mean. It really is a wonder. So, why do you ask?" The man was now curious. "I was wondering if you could determine the worth of the stones on my necklace," she mentioned. "I'll have to see it to determine anything," the man said. "Oh, okay." Muhammad then slowly unbuttoned her abaya and pulled two sides apart to show the necklace properly. "Whoa!" the Islamic philosopher exclaimed when he saw the necklace and the precious stones that were on it. He then pulled out his eyeglasses from his pocket and wore them before he leaned closer to get a better look at the beautiful necklace on her neck. "Wow! This is spectacular," he said, in awe of the necklace. "This would go for a good price in the market." "You think so?" Muhammad asked, still holding her abaya open for the Islamic philosopher to look at the necklace. Of course, the philosopher's words are interrupted by the sight of Muhammad's huge cleavage showing. She did not know they were that visible, she just wanted to show him the necklace. The Islamic philosopher brought his hand closer and held the necklace, feeling its texture and weight, touching the precious stones on it. While he ran his hand on the necklace, his hand mistakenly touched Muhammad's fingers, which were holding the top of her abaya open. Suddenly, He moved his face so close to the necklace that his nose was just an inch away from it. He sniffed the necklace, and this confused Muhammad. She didn't know why he did that, but he was the expert, so she didn't bother to question anything. But then, before she could arrange another set of thoughts, she felt his hands on her breasts, caressing them. She didn't know what to say or do. And he didn't seem to be stopping, rather, he kept massaging her breasts softly and gently. The Islamic philosopher then began remembering God, chanting the dhikr Allah while massaging her breasts. She saw this as a form of prayer and decided not to stop or interrupt the man. "Bare your breasts," he said to her. And with innocent haste, she lowered her abaya from her shoulders, exposing her breasts in their full glory and beauty. The Islamic philosopher reached for her nipples, using his fingers to tease and gently pinch them. "Allah bless you and your beauty. You are indeed a beautiful woman, and Allah will reward you for that," he prayed as he kept playing with her breasts. Nihilism versus eternity. One lovely day, Muhammad was at home alone. There was no one else in the apartment, not Muhammad or even the homeless man. She was finally getting some alone time. The apartment was very quiet, like no one was home, and she was alone in the entire apartment building. Muhammad closed the window curtains to be sure no one could mistakenly see her from outside. Then she slowly took off her shoes and her abaya. She got a container from the drawer in her room and sat on the bed in nothing but her underwear. While sitting on the bed, Muhammad opened the container she had previously taken from the drawer. It was a hair-removing cream. She took some from the container with her index finger and rubbed it between both her palms, then gently applied it on her right leg. She did this again and again, even to her left leg, until the hair remover had been even spread throughout both her legs. After she was done applying the hair remover, she just sat still on the bed, waiting for the cream to do its work. She looked around the room and tried to find something to entertain her thoughts with, but her mind could not seem to settle in one place for long. She got bored. "Ah!" she exclaimed when she remembered the face mask she had gotten from the market some days ago. So she got up from the bed and looked for the face mask. "There you are," she said as she finally found it. She took it out and walked back to the bed, where she then sat in a position from which she could see her reflection in the mirror. Then she got out the face mask from its pack and carefully placed it on her face, making sure it was properly balanced so it could best moisturize her entire face. After putting on the face mask, Muhammad then took off her bra and her pants and walked to the bathroom naked. She stepped into the bathtub with the face mask still on her face and the hair remover on her legs. She turned on the shower, which had a strong flow, and set it to be warm. She took her bath with flowing warm water and soap and washed her soft hair with her good-scenting shampoo. She scrubbed her scalp and made sure to massage her head before she rinsed her body off with warm water. After she was done taking her bath, Muhammad took her white towel and wiped her body of water until she was dry. Then she walked back into the room naked and opened her underwear drawer to get underwear to put on. She scanned through the drawer while thinking, "I need to get new underwear." She continued her vetting of all the underwear in her drawer before she finally settled on a flowery pant and a black bra, wore them, and walked to the mirror to check out the combination of underwear she had chosen, but then she stood there a bit longer, admiring her beauty and shape. Muhammad got dressed in a modest black abaya and crowned it with a niqab. She picked up her signature perfume, which announced her presence before she even entered a room. That was how her son and his friends knew she was home, even without hearing her voice. Her perfume. She wore a little of it, yet its scent was strong. She looked around the apartment before she walked to the door and exited the apartment and locked the door before continuing out of the building. She exchanged some pleasantries with some neighbors she saw as she walked out of the building and outside the building also. Then she began walking down the street. It was a busy street. Traders were trying to sell their goods while customers haggled with them. Children were playing around and shouting for joy while they played. But Muhammad just kept her focus straight. Even though she saw some things she was curious about, she wasn't just taking a stroll, she had a destination. And after some time of walking, she arrived at an Islamic shrine. It was a shrine which housed one of the righteous Muslim saints. She was a regular there. It was her place of worship. The shrine was as tall as it was large. Its topper part was a golden-colored dome which had a crescent moon on top of it. The shrine had a set of pillars in front that formed some kind of corridor before you entered the main shrine door, which was as tall as 3 men and as wide as 10 men standing in a row. It had immaculate yet simple designs drawn over its white paint, giving off a unique look. Muhammad made her way through the corridors and through those intimidating doors, where she met the person in charge of the shoeboxes standing at the side. It was a young man, not more than 18 years of age. Muhammad appreciated that this young man was serving in the shrine. She gave up her shoes to him, and he was gracious enough to give her a number as a precaution, so she could call her and get her shoes just in case, making sure they wouldn't get lost. She thanked the man and then continued into the main shrine itself, which was huge and beautiful. Its ceilings had drawings of constellations and stars. This was not Muhammad's first time coming here, but it always seemed to blow her away. In her words, she felt closer to Allah whenever she went there. She walked to the shrine and with her eyes closed, she planted a kiss on it. Then she walked to the shelves close by and took out one of the prayer books there. Muhammad walked to the women's section of the shrine and took a seat there. She then opened the prayer book and began reading from it. The shrine was serene and quiet. There were only a few people there also praying. The atmosphere was calm and spiritually uplifting. It felt as if one were closer to Allah's dwelling place in the shrine, where one's voice, prayers, and supplications could be heard as easily as if the person next to you were listening to your words. And the fact that there were others also praying just made Muhammad feel spiritually strong and confident in her prayers. It was a mood that she had missed, the mood of the spirit. After reading some texts from the prayer book, Muhammad lowered her head and began praying. She thanked Allah for the blessings and favors she had enjoyed and the ability to help others like the homeless man. And Lord, I pray for my son, Muhammad. He is out there striving to make something of himself. She prayed silently. I ask that you keep him on the right path, and that you help him be a great man, a good son and an even better Islam. Muhammad was passionate and true in her prayers. And I ask that you protect him. He is all I have. You gave him to me and I have brought him up in the way of Islam, Lord. Keep him safe at all times, regardless of the problems that might arise around him. Exempt from misfortune. She then proceeded to pray for her neighbors. Lord, you know some of them are suffering. And yes, I try to help in my little way as you instructed us to help, but you are the divine helper. Deliver them from their difficulties. Deliver them from their suffering. She prayed for her neighbors as though she was praying for her child, very heartfelt. She wished them good, just as she wished her son good. I pray that you bless the work of their hands. I pray that you bless them and make their struggles a success. They need you, they depend on you. Help them, please. After praying for her neighbors, she then began praying for her dead husband. You take care of both the living and the dead. I ask that you extend your mercy to him. He was taken away from me too soon, but you always have a plan, you always have a path. You have taken care of my son and I since my husband's demise. I pray that you take care of him, just as you have taken care of us. She began shedding tears as she prayed for her dead husband. It had been years since he died, but she missed him dearly. After she had made all her supplications and requests, Muhammad gave prayers of thanks for answers to the request she just made. It was a form of affirmation. Then she opened her eyes. That was when she noticed how deep in prayer she had been. Intelligent designer. Muhammad and her son arrived at her tailor's shop after a long walk. The shop has a glass door with the word open boldly plastered on the other part of the door. The shop had a showcase room which was protected by only a thin pane of glass. It housed some of the tailor's beautiful clothes, which he had put on display for passers-by to see. The name of the shop hung just above the flowery door in a colorful display, which no one really took notice of because of how the name design looked like the extension of the flowers on the door. Muhammad wasn't very enthusiastic to come along and watch his mother bicker with the tailor about how the clothes he sewed for her had issues. In his defense, she could have just tested the cloth when she picked it up, and they wouldn't have had to make this journey. Come on, son. I won't be too long. Muhammad tried to convince her son to be cheerier. Muhammad was wearing a niqab and a black abaya while Muhammad was wearing an expressionless face. Muhammad, who was ahead, opened the door and walked in while her son followed after her. The Indian tailor was the only one in the office. He preferred to work alone. The man was measuring a piece of cloth on the table and making markings on it with chalk when he heard the sound of the door open and shut. "Good morning. I'll be with you in a minute," the tailor said without even looking at Muhammad and Muhammad, who just entered. "No, tailor. You will attend to me right now," Muhammad responded respectfully yet strongly. "Ah, Muhammad, so nice to see you again. Have you come to sing me praises for the cloth I sewed for you?" "I wish. But quite the contrary, really. The gown you sewed for me was too wide and long, as though you did not fully understand the size and fit of the person you were sewing it for," Muhammad complained. "Really?" The tailor was shocked at this. "Yes. Which is why I've come here today, so you'll make amends to the dress." Before the tailor could utter another word, the call to prayer for afternoon prayer rang through the entire city, and they could hear it too. Muhammad disappointed. She was really hoping she would be done with the tailor before the afternoon prayer time, but that clearly did not go as she planned. "I am sorry, but I'll have to close the shop as I'm going for prayers. You can come back after." Muhammad looked at Muhammad and didn't want to disappoint him after saying they won't spend too long at the tailor's shop. "Sir, please. I really need this amendment done today, or even right now. I can't come back later because I have an appointment I cannot avoid. So please, help me out here. What do you want me to do here, I have to close shop." Muhammad ran her eyes across the entire shop. "You can close shop so no one thinks you're here. Then we can use your storage room in the back for measurements." The tailor thought hard. "Please," she pleaded, and the tailor accepted. The Indian tailor led Muhammad and her son into the warehouse after he had closed the shop. He had his measurement tape over his shoulders and a book and pen in his hand. He first measured her height from her shoulder to her feet, then her shoulders, then he wrote down the measurements immediately. "Okay, spread your arms. I need to get the right width, so I do a better job this time," he said to Muhammad as he extended the measurement tape. "Okay," she answered and spread her arms out. The Indian tailor threw his arms around Muhammad's waist trying to get the tape around her waist, but the black abaya she was still wearing was a bit of an obstruction. But he managed to get her measurement anyway. Then he tried measuring her bust, but the tape kept getting entangled with Muhammad's abaya. She quickly grew concerned that the abaya she wore was hindering the tailor's ability to measure her accurately. She worried he might not obtain her true size if he measured through the abaya, emphasizing the importance of getting it right this time. "Please wait a minute, sir," Muhammad mentioned. "Any problem, The tailor paused and asked Muhammad. Not really. I am just worried my abaya isn't letting you do your job properly." She spoke with concern. "It's fine. It's not like there is any other alternative." Perhaps that was the problem when you got my measurement for the gown. The abaya I wore didn't let you get a measurement of my true shape." "Perhaps," the tailor answered. "But like I said, there is no alternative." Once the tailor was done talking, Muhammad opened the top buttons of her abaya and pushed it off her shoulder with the words "I have an idea" leaving her lips. She stripped off the abaya in front of the tailor and her son, so the tailor could measure her properly. She was now in the clothes she wore under the abaya, which were more close to her shape than the spacey abaya. The tailor was shocked and even dumbfounded, but he did not protest. He was so caught up in admiration of Muhammad's beautiful body that he stood there paused like he was frozen. Muhammad called his attention back to the work at hand. The tailor came back to his senses and took his measuring tape, getting back to work. "Okay, let's take all the measurements again, just to be on the safe side," the tailor said to Muhammad. "Yes, that's a good idea," she concurred. The Indian tailor measured her arm length, then her shoulder and neck, and her full body length, which he took from behind, getting a beautiful view of her ass. "Okay, please raise your hands, he asked, and she did. The tailor then threw his arms around her waist with his tape again, this time from behind. He measured her waist size, then her breast size. You were right. Taking off the abaya did make a difference. The measurements are different now. I'm sure I will make the perfect dress with these measurements. You have a very smart mother, Muhammad. The Indian tailor sang words of praise about Muhammad to Muhammad. And she is beautiful and well-mannered too. You rarely see such a combination anymore. She really is special indeed. Muhammad blushed at everything the Indian tailor was saying about her. She is the best. Muhammad answered. She really is. She is my best customer too. Always patronizing my shop. Well, what can I say, you're good at your job, so naturally I would look for those who are good at their job. Like my son here. He is so good at what he does that he attracted the attention of investors. Wow. You must really be proud of him. I am. In fact, I am beyond proud. Plus, he is the most understanding son a mother could have. I see. The man answered. Muhammad sat down on a chair, still dressed only in the dress she wore beneath her abaya. The tailor walked to her in slow yet thirsty paces. He began playing with Muhammad's breasts through her shirt, softly pinching her nipples and groping the whole breasts vigorously with his hands. Muhammad seemed to be okay and happy with what he was doing, so he continued with more conviction. Muhammad began moaning as the Indian tailor squeezed both her breasts so passionately. You like that? He asked, while fondling her breasts with much gentle energy. Millimeter. She moaned so lustfully that her voice sent goosebumps all over the tailor's skin. The tailor tapped her breasts several times, giving them soft slaps while still groping them. Then he quickly unzipped his trousers and pulled out his penis, which met with Muhammad's face while Muhammad was watching also. Muhammad took the tailor's penis in her hand and began massaging it gently. Oh! The man moaned out of ecstasy. Muhammad then began stroking his penis with her fingers, making the man express so much pleasure and joyful sounds. Faster. Stroke it faster. The man asked in unclear words that were soaked in sexual tension. Muhammad did exactly what the man said and increased the speed of her stroking his penis. Oh my, you have a big penis. She praised the tailor as she stroked the man's penis. She could feel the dry friction between her hand and the man's penis. She could only imagine how rough that must have felt for him, so she decided to get rid of that friction. Muhammad suddenly took the man's penis in her mouth, to his greatest surprise. The shock almost transported him to the afterlife. Muhammad sucked the tailor's penis with even more vigor than which he used to squeeze and fondle her breasts. She would occasionally use her hands to stroke his penis, and this time, her fingers moved smoothly on his penis because it was now lubricated. The Indian tailor was enjoying Muhammad's mouth and hands on his penis, and soon he reached a climax as a result of her efforts. Bakshish. Muhammad needed some extra supplements and provisions for the house, so she decided to go to the mall to get them. She went to her usual go-to place whenever she needed to restock, a shopping mall close to her house. She shopped for a lot of things, even those that weren't on her list. It was her personal shopping day, and the mall didn't help matters either. It was big and had almost every product one could think of inside it. This gave Muhammad an unlimited list of options to choose from. Although she didn't really choose, she just picked one of each. She hadn't gone shopping in a while, so she really needed to restock. When she was done at picking everything she wanted and basically filling in 2 huge shopping carts and struggling to roll them to the cashiers, where she waited in line for about 3 minutes before it was her turn. Next. The cashier said with a loud but gentle tone, and Muhammad pulled her carts forward. Place your item over the scanner. The cashier spoke indifferently without even raising his head to look at her. That might be more difficult than you expect it to. She answered with a polite voice. It's quite easy, really, all you have to do is dash. The cashier finally raised his head and his lips sealed when he saw the number of things Muhammad had picked. Okay, we need to work together to make this fast. Okay. Muhammad answered with enthusiasm. The cashier explained to her what she was to do, and without hesitation, she began bringing up the goods while the cashier scanned them very quickly. Since the goods were so much, it took several minutes for them to get done, but they finally were finished scanning all the goods and angering impatient customers who were behind her. The cashier read out the sizable amount to her while helping her pack everything she had bought into several huge bags. Muhammad paid with her card, and the cashier thanked her for patronizing the mall, and she smiled at him generously. Muhammad then tried carrying the bags alone, but they were big and heavy and a lot, but she still struggled to lift them off of the counter. She then pulled the bags and tried walking away, but she struggled with their weight. She took some steps toward the exit door, but then one of the bags ruptured and the oranges that were in it scattered all over the floor. Muhammad expressed frustration, and seeing her plight, the Arab cashier she just paid with called one of the workers in the mall to help her. The Indian worker hurried to Muhammad's aid, helping her pick up her oranges and bagging them again. Then he helped her carry the bags. The Indian worker helped carry Muhammad's bags for her, per the instructions of the Arab cashier. But when he found out she did not come with a car or any vehicle, he asked if she would take a taxi. "Oh no, I live close by, so that will not be necessary." She answered his question with a polite smile. On hearing this, the Indian worker decided to help her carry her bags all the way to her house. He became her very own porter. When they got to the apartment building, Muhammad mentioned that she was very thankful and that the Indian worker didn't need to carry the bags all the way to her house. "You've already been so much help. I don't want to be a bother to you. I assure you, it is no bother." The Indian worker spoke so nicely. "Okay, then." Muhammad accepted. The Indian worker carried the bags to Muhammad's house, and she even unlocked the door for him to carry them in. "Wow. You have a beautiful home, he said with a wowed smile as he looked around the house. "Thank you." Muhammad answered politely. The Indian worker dropped the bags on the table in the sitting room and said, "Okay, I'll be leaving now." "Oh no. Please wait a minute. I need to appreciate you." "Oh, it is okay, No. Please wait a second." Muhammad quickly opened her handbag to get some money. She wanted to give him a tip. But there was no money in her back. She then checked her wallet, but the same was the case, there was no money inside. Muhammad was disappointed. She felt bad for some seconds. "Oh." She then expressed when she remembered that she had some money in her bra, which she was wearing. She reached into her dress and put her hand into her bra and pulled the money that was in there. In trying to reach the money that was in her bra, Muhammad mistakenly exposed her cleavage in front of the porter, who sees this and admires her cleavage. He could see her radiant skin and the side of her two boobs that formed the hollow of the cleavage, but Muhammad didn't know this. She didn't know her cleavage was now exposed and that the Indian worker could now see. Muhammad handed the money to the Indian worker with an innocent smile, saying, "Thank you so much for your help." She spoke with genuine gratitude. The Indian worker received the tip from her with a big smile and answered, "Thank you very much for your kindness, and it was my pleasure serving you." The Indian worker then left the house with a thankful smile. Mother's sin on the big couch. There was a 57-year-old man who had been neighbors with Muhammad and her son for years now, a long time. He was a simpleton, a man whose mind was deconstructed as a result of a head injury he sustained in a car accident some 20 years ago. He was fortunate to have a son who became a rich businessman. But sometimes, misfortune bites a person more than just once. The simple-minded man's son died a terrible death. He had been sick for some time and the sickness finally overcame him, killing him in his sleep. The simple-minded man's son had a relationship with Muhammad. He was one of the investors that invested in Muhammad's story business. And now that he was gone, his shares in the company belonged to no one at the moment, so the man wanted to inherit his son's shares, as was his right as his son's only living relative. So, the man wanted to talk to Muhammad and ask him for his help, being that they were neighbors, and he had known him for a long time. The man went to the company's office complex, where he was hoping to meet Muhammad and formally ask him for his help. He walked through the office doors, looking unsure of what he wanted to do. His hands were shaking as a result of nervousness. He had tried to stay away from fancy or corporate places like banks and the lot since his accident because he did not want to make a fool of himself by looking stupid. But this was unavoidable, it was a necessity. He approached the receptionist's counter and the young man there greeted him warmly, "Good morning, sir. How may I be of service to you? The man's anxiety got worse. He tried to form a sentence, but found it very difficult. He struggled, but then he was able to say, I need help. The receptionist was nice and patient with him. He slowed down his words and asked, How can I help you? Umm Muhammad. The simple-minded man stuttered. Muhammad? Who is Muhammad? Is that who you want to see? The man nodded his head in confirmation of the receptionist's question. But he knew that was not information enough. There must be tens of Muhammad in that company, so he needed a way to narrow it down, but he didn't know how. The receptionist was also thinking the same thing. Do you know what department he works in or what level of the company Muhammad is at? The receptionist asked with concern. Seeing how calm the receptionist was with him made him more vocal. Shareholder, he answered. Wonderful. That's a big step forward. Well, there are 2 shareholders named Muhammad, so we just have to figure out which out of the 2 shareholders bearing the name is the one you are looking for. Writer. The simple-minded man mentioned with vigor. Ah, Muhammad the writer. He is the creative mind behind this whole company. Just give me a second, I need to call his office and confirm a meeting. What is your name? Abdullah, the man answered. The receptionist picked up the phone on his desk and made a call to Muhammad's office but was informed that Muhammad was not in at the moment. He informed the simple-minded man of this, and he was truly disappointed. The simple-minded man was disappointed, but he wasn't going to let that disappointment determine the rest of his day. He had expected Muhammad to be at work given that it was a work day, but he was informed that Muhammad sometimes works from home. So, he proceeded to the apartment where he stayed. Muhammad and her son stayed a few houses away from him. He went to the building Muhammad lives in and knocked respectfully, then he waited. He heard footsteps approach the door, and soon the door opened. It was Muhammad who opened it. She was wearing a safsari on her head and was quite surprised to see him. Mr. Abdullah, salam alaikum. She greeted him respectfully. Alaikum salam. He answered. Come in. Come have a seat. She welcomed him in. Muhammad had known the simple-minded man for a very long time and was very cordial to him. She offered him water when he had taken a seat, and he gulped down the entire glass. He was thirsty. Muhammad sat on the couch opposite him and asked with a very polite tone, What brings you by, sir? Your son. The man began, and this took Muhammad by surprise. My son? She asked with a calm, but surprised tone. Yes, your son. Is he in? I went to look for him at his company, but I was told he wasn't at work today. Oh, my son likes to work from home sometimes. He is in his room right now, working. Ah, I see. I need your son's help, Muhammad. Muhammad could see his countenance fall and she became very concerned. She leaned forward and asked with a caring voice, What is the problem and how can we help? Well, as you know, my son died a week ago. Yes, I know. And I am very sorry for your loss, Mr. Abdullah. Thank you, Muhammad. The thing is, my son was a shareholder in your son's company. And now that he is gone without fathering any child, I am entitled to inherit those shares, and I was hoping that your son, Muhammad, would help me through the process. You know, I don't know anything about all these things, and having someone who does would really help to mention his position in the company, which will make everything smoother. Wait a minute. I'll be right back, she said and got up from the couch. She called her son's name as she walked to his room, where she asked him about the simple-minded man's son's shares. Muhammad opened his drawer and gave his mother a check of shares inherited that belonged to the deceased. He was supposed to give it to Mr. Abdullah earlier but had become so occupied with work that he forgot. Muhammad took the check to the simple-minded man sitting in the sitting room and gave him the check. The man was very grateful. The simple-minded man burst into uncontrollable tears after taking the inheritance and thanking Muhammad. He sobbed and cried out in what was a bittersweet emotion. He was appreciative of the inheritance check but could not help but think about how the only reason he was inheriting anything was because of his dear son's death. Muhammad sympathized with him. She knew what it was like to lose a loved one and would not wish that on anybody. He cried on, and she could not bear to see him tear up so much, so she sat beside him on the couch and hugged him. He buried his face in her shoulder and cried on. "It's okay, let it all out." She spoke softly to him. "I know it hurts like a hole in your chest, and you probably don't even want that hole to heal because you feel that hole is a connection you have to the person you just lost, but I am assuring you that it will get better with time." She spoke affectionately. "You will cry a lot, but you will be fine in the end. And I am here if you ever need anyone to talk to. You don't have to do this alone. It is so hard." He tried to speak while crying, but only stammered and struggled. "I know, and I am very sorry about that. Which is why we will be here for you if you need anything. And you will be in my prayers." Muhammad then took the safsari off her head and planted a kiss on his cheek to calm him down. He suddenly stopped crying and looked at Muhammad with sad eyes. He then puts her on the couch, which was quite large, it could contain 3 people. He pulled the dress she wore under the safsari up also, exposing her underwear. The man quickly removed her underwear, then unzipped his trousers and pulled out his penis. She was lying upwards, so he stuck his penis inside her vagina and she let out a loud moan. He began riding on top of her in a missionary position. She then pulled her abaya higher, exposing her big breasts in the living room. He continued fucking her while her breasts jiggled because they were so big and so soft. He grabbed them one time and kept riding her vagina very hard. Muhammad suddenly walked into the living room and saw Mr. Abdullah riding his mother, and this was a big shock to him. He stood there in surprise looking at them, but that did not make the man stop. Instead, he continued riding her while her breasts faced forward, bouncing. He increased his pace at a point and began moaning loudly, "Oh." His voice started quaking, and he quickly pulled his penis out of her vagina and moved higher to her breast where he stroked his penis quickly while tightening his face in intense pleasure, and he ejaculated on her big breasts. Sacrifice ego. Muhammad packed for the trip he was about to go on with his friends. It was a trip they had been planning for so long but haven't been able to go as a result of Muhammad's busy schedule and lack of chance to do anything that wasn't work-related. They were going on a desert trip in which they would drive through the desert and find a place to camp and enjoy the beautiful night sky of the desert. As they packed up the necessary things they needed, one of his friends casually suggested, "Why don't your mother come with us? It could be fun." "No." Muhammad shut down the idea, just as quickly as it was raised. "Why not?" his friend asked. "Because I say so. Come on, Muhammad, if you're going to turn down an idea you should at least let us know why. The real reason. Okay, how about this? It is a trip for us guys. And having any woman on this trip, whoever she might be, even if it were my mother, just defeats the origin of the idea." Muhammad's point sounded valid to his friends, so they shook their heads in understanding and agreement. But Muhammad didn't stop there. He wanted to kill and uproot the idea from their heads, so he continued to ask, "What birthed the idea for a boys' desert trip?" One of them then answered, "The need for brotherhood and for us to catch up with each other and what's been going on in our lives, because we have all been so busy with work." "Exactly," Muhammad enforced. The apartment door opened and Muhammad walked in with her handbag in one hand and a supermarket bag in the other. She met the sight of Muhammad packing and his friends already packed with their boxes right by their sides. "Salam alaikum." They all greeted her once she came in. "Alaikum salam." Muhammad answered with the most bewildered shock on her face. She looked around and could not help but ask, "Son, what is going on?" Muhammad kept packing things into his bag as he said, "We are planning and packing." "What for?" she asked curiously. "We are going on a desert trip." This came as a huge surprise to Muhammad. She looked at her son with the most asking of expressions. "You're going on a trip, you say? How did I not know about this? It was pretty last minute. We had been planning it for some time now, but never actually got a chance to go. My schedule cleared up, and I thought, why not?" Muhammad was lost for words. She could not imagine being in this house all alone for however long they would be gone. "Can I please come with you?" Muhammad asked with a desperate tone. "Mother, it is a guy's trip for just me and the boys. Even if I wanted you to come with us, I couldn't still carry you along. Please, son." You can't just leave me in this house alone for God knows how long. It will be boring and lonely and scary. I am sorry, but you can't come with us, Muhammad concluded. Muhammad looked at her son's friends in hopes that they would intercede for her. We had already brought it earlier. He wouldn't have it. One of the friends said. Muhammad then had an idea. She needed to showcase her strengths and values to win her son over. She needed to show him that he needed her on this trip. Do any of you know how to start a campfire? I can. I have been camping several times. I am sure we can work our way around that. Muhammad answered, still insistent on not carrying her along. I can cook, as you all know. She added. The best of cooks. Muhammad's friends added, supporting her claim. Muhammad had thought it over and over again and was finally convinced that his mother should come with them. Okay, fine. Muhammad echoed, and his mother squealed in joy. They packed up and were soon on the road on their desert trip with the mother. They found a good spot to set up camp just before it got dark. A large tent big enough for the four of them was set up and stuffed with all the pillows and blankets they had brought. Muhammad set up the campfire just a few feet away from the tent, and when she was done, she asked, So, who is hungry? Me. They all echoed like children. Okay. Let me cook up something quickly, she said to them. In under an hour, she was done preparing a delicious dish for them, and they were so thankful to her. They rushed the food until the entire pot was empty and they were completely filled. They all lay in the tent, tired and overfed, and began talking. They spent hours conversing about the different curves of their lives, catching up on what each of them had been doing. You can't like your secretary, she's married. Muhammad replied to his friend's story. I know. But it's not like I have an on and off switch for my emotions. His friend answered and laughed. They all suddenly heard the sound of hurried footsteps outside the tent and they became alarmed. Who's there? Muhammad asked at the top of his voice, and the tent was torn open from outside with a knife. They all exclaimed in terror and fear for their lives. They saw their attackers. They were Bedouin bandits. Their attackers were 3 armed men who surged into their tent with their guns pointed at Muhammad with his mother and friends. Everybody, hands up. On your knees, the armed men shouted. Everyone was terrified. They did as their attackers instructed without hesitation. Muhammad was particularly shaking in fear. If any of you so much as move or say a single word, I will shoot the life out of you. Understand? One of the armed men shouted. They were too terrified to answer, so he asked with a higher voice, Understand? Yes. Yes. They all answered with shaky voices. Search them. The one who was talking instructed the others. He seemed like the leader. The other 2 quickly started searching Muhammad and his friends' pockets, pulling out their wallets and anything they could find in their pockets. Check their bags too. The leader instructed, and they continued to their bags. What do you want? We don't have much cash with us. There's barely any use for cash in the desert. One of Muhammad's friends beseeched them. He's right. You can check. Muhammad added. Shut up. The leader shouted so angrily at them and rushed at Muhammad, grabbing his collar, and was about to stamp the handle of his gun on Muhammad's face. Please. Muhammad shouted, pleading. She laid on the floor. He didn't mean to offend you. The leader paused and let go of Muhammad. He put his gun underneath his belt, and then he shifted his attention to Muhammad. You sure know how to change a man's mind. He looked at her naughtily. I'm sure you can be persuasive in other areas too. He moved closer to Muhammad, who was still lying face down on the floor. Did you find anything? He asked his cohorts while looking at Muhammad's shape, properly carved on the floor. Nothing yet. Other than the change in their wallets. This was a stupid bust. They don't have anything of value with them. The second one added with disappointment as he scattered through their belongings. Keep searching. In the meantime, I will take this one for myself, as compensation for my efforts. The leader spoke about Muhammad. He had decided to kidnap her. This made Muhammad agitated. He wasn't going to stand by and watch his mother get taken by some brute. The leader was about to grab her by the nape and raise her, But before his hand could touch her, Muhammad quickly grabbed his gun which was hanging from his waist and pushed him. Seeing that Muhammad had armed himself, one of them searching the tent suddenly opened fire at Muhammad's friends. He shot one of them in the head and he died instantly. Muhammad, with quick reflexes, retaliated immediately before the man could pull the trigger again by shooting him several times till he was sure the man was void of life. Muhammad killed the man who killed his friend. He stood over him with a terrible grin on his face, angry and sad at the same time. The other thief with a gun turned to point his gun at Muhammad, but Muhammad quickly grabbed the leader and held his gun to his head. Muhammad's other friend hurried and picked up the gun of the bandit Muhammad just shot and pointed at the last thief with a gun. "Drop it!" the thief shouted. "You drop yours!" Muhammad shouted. "Drop it or I swear to God I will kill him. And my friend here will kill you." Muhammad's voice was soaked with bitterness and rage. The thief with the gun could see the seriousness in Muhammad's eyes, and he could hear it in his voice. Muhammad's other friend was shaking. The thief then raised his gun, surrendering. He went on his knees. "Put the gun on the ground and push it away," Muhammad instructed, putting his gun in the leader's mouth to emphasize how serious he was. The thief did just as Muhammad instructed and pushed the gun away, and Muhammad's friend quickly picked it up. Muhammad then left the leader and walked to his dead friend. He looked at him lying there lifeless with his blood on the floor and tears began rolling out of his eyes. The thieves began begging for their lives. "Please forgive us. If you let us go, you will never see us again." "Shut up," Muhammad shouted at them, but they kept begging him. Muhammad angrily tucked the gun under his belt, then rushed outside. He returned wielding the iron skewer Muhammad had used for roasting meat in one hand and the large cleaver she used for carving meat in the other. "Please, please." The leader's voice increased, but Muhammad did not listen. He approached the leader like a lightning bolt and stabbed him in the neck with the iron skewer. The leader fell to the floor, choking on his own blood till he died. Muhammad then turned to the other thief who was also now begging at the top of his voice. He was so scared for his life. Muhammad didn't mind his pleas and tears. He walked to him and swung the large cleaver against the thief's neck with speed and strength, cutting off his head. Muhammad fell to his knees and screamed bitterly. He was infuriated and saddened by the death of his friend. His living friend then walked to him and held him by the shoulder, joining him in tears. They both carried the dead bodies of the 3 gunmen and that of their friend outside the tent and dug a grave large enough for all of them. Muhammad was still in shock as a result of all that just happened. She couldn't believe Muhammad's friend that she had known since he was a child was now dead. They put all the dead bodies in the grave and said words of prayers, burying them properly with righteousness. As they covered the grave, Muhammad with his mother and living friend began shedding painful tears. They were sorrowful. Honoring the guest. Muhammad left the desert with his mother and living friend that same day as the incident and went back to the city. Days had now passed since their tragic encounter in the desert, but life had to go on. Muhammad was back at work and his mother was back to her duties as a mother and the woman of the house. Muhammad's surviving friend had not been coping well since they left the desert. He could not sleep without having nightmares and the images kept appearing in his mind even when he was awake. He could not talk to anyone about it, and he was worried about Muhammad who had the worst of his and Muhammad who must still be traumatized. So he decided to go see Muhammad and his mother in their house that day. He went to the house and knocked softly, and Muhammad opened the door after some seconds. She saw him standing there with a bag in hand. He raised the bag and said, "I bought you some fresh fruits and biscuits from the market." "Oh, that is so thoughtful of you. Please come in," she said, and let him in. "Take a seat," she offered, and he handed her the fruits and biscuits before sitting on the couch. Muhammad took the fruits to the kitchen and returned with a glass of water for her guest. She offered him the glass of water and sat beside him. He drank the entire glass at once and dropped the empty cup on the table. He looked at Muhammad who could see the trouble in his eyes and the dark circles around them. She was an intuitive woman. "What is the problem?" she asked him with concern. "It has not been easy," he started. "You can't sleep?" she asked. Is that why you have dark circles? She was concerned for him. No, I can't. I can't even close my eyes without seeing what happened. I couldn't help but wonder how Muhammad was doing and how you are doing. Muhammad took a deep breath and started. Well, it has not been easy, but we cannot dwell on the past, if not it will eat us up. I wouldn't consider what happened to be the past, it is still very recent. My dear, even the words of thanks I said to you when you offered me the fruits you brought, are in the past. Anything that isn't happening right now, this instant, in this second we are in, is the past. So try not to lose much sleep over it. You think so? He asked. I know so. All you can do now is move forward with your life. And all you can do for your friend who tragically lost his life is to pray for him. I suppose you are right. He said with a more upbeat tone than he had when he first came in. Of course. Don't worry, you'll be fine. So, tell me what you have been doing for days now whenever you couldn't sleep. He let out a little chuckle before he started talking. Muhammad's day at work was a long and busy one, and at that moment, all he wanted to do was come home, have a good meal, shower, and rest. He hurried home once work closed for the day, rejecting every offer by his colleagues to join them for a meal at a restaurant. What he really needed was a home-cooked meal and a lot of rest. He had been coping with everything that happened by working himself to the bone, staying busy a lot. When he got home, he opened the door and walked into the sitting room when he saw his mother and his friend who survived the attack in the desert with them on the couch. Muhammad was kissing his friend on the cheek, as though she was caressing his cheeks with her lips. She saw her son and smiled at him but continued, she moved her lips to his lips, kissing it with a tenderness that only a mother could give. It wasn't lustful or erotic, neither was it ill-intended. She was just being a caring mother to her son's friend. She kissed her son's friend repeatedly. Muhammad did not move from the spot he was standing in. He kept looking at them with an intense stare as his mother kissed his friend repeatedly in front of him. After a while of watching, Muhammad cleared his throat loudly, ahum, and sat on the couch opposite them. Muhammad, my friend, I didn't know you had returned. Welcome. His friend paused for a second and greeted him happily. Once he said that, Muhammad continued kissing him. She kissed him non-stop even as her son answered. Well, I am. After a long day at work. Muhammad answered. Muhammad paused for a few seconds and said, your friend brought us some biscuits. I can't get you that and some tea to keep your stomach occupied before dinner is ready. Then she continued kissing his friend on the lips. That would be wonderful, mother. He said to her. She kissed his friend passionately for a little more time before she got up and went to the kitchen. How are you holding up? His friend asked him. Well, I am alive, my mother is alive and you are alive. That is what matters. I can't imagine what would have happened if I had lost more than one person that day. Muhammad said. His friend exhaled. I pray for him every day. Muhammad was talking about his dead friend. Your mother recommends that. His friend said. Yes. It is quite helpful. Both for us who are making the prayer and for our friend in the afterlife. Muhammad walked back in with a tray of biscuits and cups with a jug of tea which she kept on the table. She then poured into the cups and gave them to her son and his friend in a saucer. She took hers and sat back on the couch beside Muhammad's friends. Then she leaned to him and kissed his lips for a little while. Enjoy the biscuits, she said to them as they all began eating and sipping their tea, while Muhammad kissed her son's friend repeatedly, and they all engaged in small talk that made them laugh or smile. Chapter 4. Bond Pantheism and Panentheism between the mother and the son. It was 9 o'clock at night and Muhammad could not sleep. He was surrounded by disturbing thoughts that made him roll uncomfortably on his bed. It was not just one thing that was plaguing his thoughts, it was a lot of things, everything in fact. Work, the incident from the desert, life. He was so disturbed and feeling uneasy that his bed felt like mud on a rock. It had been a stressful day at work. He had to meet the deadline for a project which he had been putting off for so long. And it was as though his nervous system had been heightened to feel everything at a multiplied level. So even the tiniest protest to his words got him worked up. He was like that till he got back to the house at the end of the day. And the desert incident didn't help matters. He kept hearing the voice of the gunman begging him and seeing the bodies as they buried them. He had to shake his head several times to pursue the thoughts away from him. But we're persistent. He then noticed how much he was sweating, so he decided to take a bath, hoping to wash away not just the sweat on his skin but also the discomfort and the silly thoughts having a field day in his head. But even while in the shower, the thoughts persisted and this affected his mood badly, making negative emotions run through him. First it was anger, then it was sadness, then unrest. And nothing seemed to be quelling the effects of these thoughts, not even the cold shower he was taking. So he decided to vent. He put off the shower and wiped his body dry before putting on his light nightwear and went to his mother's room. Her room's door was wide open, so he just walked in and stood in front of the door. His mother was reading a book on Islamic Sufism and divine love, so her eyes and attention were buried in the book. But when she noticed him standing there, she raised her head a bit, looking at him from the top of her large eyeglasses which she was wearing. "Son," she called, a little surprised to see him standing there. She then looked at him properly. "What is wrong?" "I cannot sleep, Mom," he said to her, still standing in the same place. "Really? Why not?" she asked with concern. "I don't know," he answered. "Too many thoughts, I guess." "Oh, come here, my dear son. Don't be worried," she said to him, and he walked to her. "Did you try taking a cold bath or reading?" She took his hand in hers, and he answered, "Yes, I just took my bath and I tried reading earlier. Nothing is working." "Oh my baby," she sympathized with him. "What could be troubling you? Come, take a seat beside me." Muhammad obeyed, and with the guide of his mother's hand, he sat next to her on the bed. Muhammad sat next to his mother and buried his face in his palms. He was not having the best of nights, and it was affecting his behavior and procession of thought. His mother looked at him with care. She was worried about him and wanted to help make him feel all right. She had always been a shoulder for him to lean on and cry on, and she was always the one to wipe his tears away and help him get up on his feet again. Muhammad knew he needed her, and she was always open to welcome him. "What is wrong?" she asked, this time with a mild tenderness in her voice. He raised his head and looked at her with teary eyes that made her even more worried and now emotional. She dropped the book she was reading close to the bedhead and moved closer to him, closing the gap that was between them on the foam. She took his hand in hers, rubbing it affectionately and softly, and then she said with a voice so tender, "Talk to me, my son. What troubles you?" Muhammad looked at her and said, "Everything just feels too much. I want everything to just stop." "Oh, my son," she started, still caressing his hands. "I know life can be tough. But we need to stand our ground. Besides, you have me to always lean on. I'm always here for you." "I know, he answered softly. "Thank you so much." She comforted him with words of encouragement and then hugged him gently, patting and rubbing him on the back. "So, why don't you tell me how work went today? You want to know about work?" he asked with mild awe. "Of course," she answered enthusiastically. "Why do you sound so surprised? You're a special woman. Most women don't want to hear about their husband or even son's day at work." "Well, I'm different." She smiled at him. Muhammad chuckled and buried his chin into her neck with a subtle smile. He was now relaxed and comfortable, still in his mother's embrace. He felt safe and protected from all that troubled him. "Do you feel better now?" she asked. Yes, I do," he answered. "That's wonderful," she said. "Thank you, Mum," he said to her with the softest of voices. "Of course. I'm here to always make you feel better." He then let go of her and looked into her eyes. "Oh, yes. For being in my life, for raising me, and for taking care of me even when things didn't seem to be going your way. Thank you for being a strong mother. But not just that. Thank you for being you, my source of inspiration, the foundation of my ideas. The reason my company even exists, because without you, it wouldn't." Muhammad blushed and said, "Stop with the flattery, son." "No, mother. It is a fact." Without you and your stories, the company would not be in existence. If you didn't live your life and experience the things you did and were so open enough to share them with me, I wouldn't have become the storyteller I am today, and the company would not have been created." Muhammad got so emotional. She thought to herself, what good did I do to have such a grateful and wonderful son? She held his hand and said to him with teary eyes, "It is no problem, my darling. My stories are your stories. And anytime you want any of my exciting life stories, I'm here for you. Thank you so much, Mother." Muhammad thanked her with a loving voice. The truth is, my stories might have inspired you, but you had the creativity to weave them into something special, something a company could be built upon. And the fact that you keep finding new ways to tell them is so unique. Muhammad commended her son, so always be proud of that. Muhammad became emotional. He stared into his mother's beaming eyes and said to her, "Well, I came from you, so the creativity came from you also. You gave me everything I have and everything I am. My brain, my character, my dashing looks." They both laughed when he mentioned dashing looks. The mother and son duo were truly good-looking. Muhammad touched her son's cheeks and with a proud smile said to him, "You have become a talented writer and work in a field of writing stories, my son." "Thank you, Mother. The blessing is in your life stories. You are very modest, my son. You act so humble, even when you have risen so high up the societal ladder. You started a company and even run it, and yet, you act so humble. You are the true blessing." "Oh Mother, I can't take all the credit," he answered modestly. "It was a combined effort and combined ideas. But the most predominant ideas are yours." Muhammad blushed at her son's praise, and he continued, "All those nights when I couldn't sleep, and you'd stay awake with me, telling me stories of things you did and how you did them and the things that happened to you. Your stories are what have kept me inspired up till now." So modest. "You think I haven't read your recent publications? I have noticed how much you have grown as a talented writer. You've truly evolved, becoming better every day." Muhammad hailed her son honestly. She was indeed proud of his steady improvement as a writer and as a storyteller. "Thank you for your kind words, Mother," Muhammad answered with a little bow. She then put her hand on his thigh and patted him softly like a way of showing how proud of him she was. "And how you convey stories is just so surreal. If they weren't stories of my life, I'd have thought they were so imaginary to be real. You tell them in such a superb way. I am proud of you and how far you've come," she said, running through his hair with her fingers. "It is a growth that you inspired." Muhammad let out a soft giggle. "How special you are for devoting yourself to expressing your mother's life in a creative way. I would never have thought that the stories of my life could become something so great and renowned." "Now who's being modest?" he asked sarcastically. "Your stories were already so great. I couldn't get enough of them. I just had the honor of being the one to tell them to the world. They are the bedrock of everything my company is and will always be." "By being the one to tell my stories to the world, you mean you're stealing my stories to increase sales of your company's products?" she said jokingly to her son. They both laughed at her joke, and he said with the same joking tone, "Well, it isn't stealing because we have your consent to use them. You now sound like a lawyer." Muhammad said to her son, still joking, "Well, I have had to work with lawyers, so I suppose they are rubbing off on me a bit," he answered. "Do you think your lawyers can work their way out if I sue?" She kept on joking. He laughed for a bit before he replied with a smile, "You're feisty tonight. Your stories have become a popular phenomenon for readers. They have come to love your stories almost as much as I loved them as a child. Plus, I'm sure you tell the stories better than I ever will." She was pleased with his words and said with joy, "You are your mother's boy. Proud, blessed, and great." Muhammad was very proud of her son and was prouder of how modest he was in his accomplishments and how he praised her. She was proud to be his mother. With a proud smile, she ran her fingers over her son's soft cheeks, softly caressing and pinching them, then saying, "You really are good-looking." They both laughed when she said this. And then he replied, "I got it from you, so imagine how beautiful you are, since you're the original." They chuckled at each other's flattery and jokes, and she traced her fingers from his cheeks down to his neck and leaned forward a little closer, so her lips could touch his beautiful soft skin. She first planted a kiss on his cheek and felt its warmth. Then she had some of it in her mouth, sucking it and letting go. It made a plopping sound, and she licked the area she just sucked that was now a big red. "Your skin is so soft," she said, "it almost feels edible. You can eat it if you want," Muhammad said with a smile. Muhammad just sat still as his mother licked his cheeks repeatedly, savoring them like a deliciously spiced steak. She garnished his cheeks with kisses over and over again that if she wore lipstick, his face would have been covered in it, but thankfully, she wasn't. She kept on kissing him face on and on, from his cheeks to his forehead to his chin and even his nose. Muhammad sat still with his eyes bulging open. His nerves were on the edge, waiting to dive off the cliff. Time moved at the same pace as a newborn snail as he watched his mother's sumptuous lips slowly moving towards him. In that time freeze, he could see every detail of her marvelous lips. Her lips were laced with thin pink shadow and wet with a bit of saliva. He could not wait for her lips to get to him. He was filled with a surge of emotion that he could not control. The hair on his skin tingled endlessly, and he could feel a wave of nervousness run all over his body from top to bottom repeatedly. The tension in the room was electric, and the anticipation of what was coming built up like an EMP charge and was getting to its climax. And with each inch Muhammad moved, her son's heart pulsated at an alarming volume. He was anxious and yet excited. And in between them was some sort of magnetic force that just made everything harder, so they couldn't even pull away if they wanted to. What was at work here was more than ordinary. The force was pulling them in, closer to each other. Inch after inch, their lips traveled, and then finally, their lips touched in a gentle and soft embrace. Yet it felt like a passionate collision that caused an explosion of cells and an implosion of hormones. Their kiss was slow and gentle and full of love, and felt so passionate that they were entirely wrapped up in each other. The mother was quickly drowning in her passion for her son that had to get herself together, so she said, slowly pulling her lips away, "It's time to sleep, my love." Her lips shook as she spoke. "Do you feel sleepy? Do you want me to tell you a bedtime story tonight? It will help you sleep better." Muhammad was restless. He could not stay a second without kissing her soft lips. He was like a child who tasted sugar for the first time, or an addict who felt the surge of a new drug. He wanted more and was going to get more, so he kissed her some more. Then the son replied, "This is our story. Right here, right now. Let us write it beautifully." They came into each other's warm embrace and continued kissing. Each exchange of saliva and breath was more passionate with each kiss. They enjoyed each other's lips slowly, kissing each other like they were drunk on each other's lips. Their eyes were completely shut as they kissed and only opened whenever they wanted to say something to one another. They were completely immersed in the feeling that they could not even think about anything else. Their entire focus was on that moment. Muhammad deepened the kiss by speeding up the tempo. The quicker they kissed, the more they fell into each other's caress. They kissed harder and faster, and in the millisecond Muhammad was able to catch her breath. She said, "I am not sate with you, my son." "Me too, mother. I want more of you." Muhammad spoke with a tense tone, panting as though he had run a quarter mile. They continued kissing again, pulling into each other like gravity and the earth. They kissed and kissed the night away, and time moved quickly past them as though it was on wheels, faster than the eyes could see. But they did not even notice. To them, it was but a few moments that had passed. They were so encapsulated in the steaming pleasure of the moment to notice anything go by, not even time. Every kiss was captivating, every moan, every exchange of synergy was electrifying. Muhammad could feel a strange flux of warmth filling her up as she kissed her son so sweetly. She moved her hands to his head and grabbed his hair so tightly that he felt a sharp but sensual pain that made him moan aloud. Muhammad tangled her son's hair around her fingers like strings from a puppet master to the puppet. And with each pull, Muhammad moved to the direction she wanted, while they still kissed. They moved in a symphonic rhythm that could only be likened to a dance. Basking in each other's warmth and caress and sweet lips. Muhammad then moved her other hand from Muhammad's head and then to his cheeks, which she massaged for some seconds before moving her hand to his neck with her pinky finger grazing the side of his lips while still kissing him. She stroked his neck slowly and moved down to the upper part of his chest. Muhammad felt like he had hugged an electric pole. It was overwhelming, yet he could not let go. He was stuck. Muhammad's hand traveled from his upper chest to his arm, which she began to caress gently, rubbing it softly while she kissed him passionately. "I love you, mother," Muhammad whispered so passionately underneath his breath as he kissed his mother soulfully. "I love you too, son," Muhammad whispered, gripping her son's hair with one hand and caressing his arm with the other. Their emotions and feelings were heightened and they were on the same wavelength, connected in every way. Their connection was magnetic, even somewhat magical. It was so to the point of their hearts beating together with the same sound and speed. They could feel it too, their hearts beating together as one and their arteries pumping blood with the same speed. They were in perfect harmony with each other, body, soul, and mind. Muhammad kissed her son so passionately that both their lips looked like burning hot red coal. She sucked on his lips as a bee sucks through the pollen of a flower. "My son," she spoke as she kissed him, "you have soft and beautiful lips. I got them from you, mother." He spoke with shortness of breath, interjected by steamy kisses. "You gave me the best part of you." She held his chin with her thumb and index finger as she kissed him more sweetly, sucking on his tongue with every sensor on her tongue and on his lips with the bestiality of a hungry lion, as though she was eating him up. Muhammad could feel the passion she felt through the sensual kiss of her lips. She shared every ounce of her emotion with him, everything she was feeling through that long, passionate, and continuous kiss. She pulled away for just a second and looked at him with a longing that can only be compared to a horse journeying through the desert for days, thirsting for water. And when she reached for him again and their lips impacted on each other like a meteor crashing into a planet, there was an eruption of chaotic hormones that fumed so forcefully they escalated into the atmosphere, turning it into an intoxicating realm of otherworldly pleasure. They could feel a cloud hanging above them as they rubbed their tongues together. It was as though their tongues developed hands, holding, caressing and hugging each other in a vehement warp of emotions that not even clustered fingers could mimic. They sat there exchanging cells, atoms, and molecules in the most moist and slippery vividness. Muhammad suddenly sparked as though a bomb inside him went off, and he increased the pace with which he kissed his mother. He became a tad bit violent with his lips and tongue and even introduced little teeth. Muhammad moaned when Muhammad bit her lower lip and felt a surge of sparks which felt like neutrons clashing with nucleus that creates more neutrons to collide with more nuclei in an endless combustible perfervid. "I love you, my son." Muhammad moaned so loudly into her son's mouth that it echoed down into the depths of his heart and struck a chord that made him respond, "I love you more, my sweet darling mother." They French kissed for what seemed like an eternity, but time was still not enough for any of them. Muhammad slowly and softly bit his mother's tongue while they kissed like he was holding her prisoner, like she was his pet. Her eyes opened for a second, and she saw the way Muhammad looked at her with a burning desire in his eyes. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time in his life and that she had caught his every attention, she had his every focus. She tried to pull away for a second, but Muhammad's lips followed her like a heat-seeking missile, not wanting to let go of its target. So, she leaned forward again and delved into the kiss the way a human dives into a pool of water and becomes submerged in the waves of their emotions. Muhammad was feeling an obscene level of emotions rushing through her body, like how the water forces its way through the cracks of a leaking dam until finally, the whole dam comes crashing down, and Muhammad's feelings finally broke through and pushed down the dam that previously held her in check. She was like an animal in heat, wanting nothing else than to feel the overwhelming pleasure that came by being touched by someone you love in the most sensual of ways. She was buried in that kiss, but then, like a phoenix, she quickly arose from it, pulling away at such a speed that not even Muhammad could follow. "I love the way you look at me," she said to him with a sweet, soft tone. "You have always been a good boy. You have always done what was best for your mother, and I appreciate you for that, my son. Of course. You are special to me, mother." Muhammad smiled at her son with an innocent naughtiness, and then shifted her magical gaze from her son's dreamy face to the long cotton nightgown she was wearing. It was open-chested by design, so Muhammad could see her. "Feel it," she said to him, and took his right hand to the side of her waist, placing it there for him to feel the soft fabric, which made Muhammad so hard to the point that his penis was bulging through his soft pajama trousers. She then let go of his hand and moved her hand to her shoulders, where she slowly pushed off the straps that hung the nightgown on her body, and the gown dropped to her waist, revealing her big breasts safely tucked behind a soft-looking blue bra. Muhammad's jaws dropped in glorious awe of the wonder that had been displayed before him. "Wow," he expressed. "You have beautiful breasts, mother." Muhammad smiled sheepishly at his words, her cheeks reddened from her blushing at his comment. "The fit so well into your pretty bra," he complimented again. Muhammad suddenly unhooked her bra, and it fell off her breasts, revealing them in their full glory. Muhammad's lower lip could not hold onto his upper lip at the sight of these gorgeous melons he is being faced with. He began moving his hands towards them, and the anticipation from both as his hands traveled that short distance in slow motion was killing them. Muhammad leaned forward to shorten the journey of his hands, and he suddenly grabbed both her breasts in his hands. Muhammad let out a soft moan, and Muhammad began fondling and caressing her breast so softly that it made his express low grunts of pleasure. He then held her nipple between his thumb and index finger, pinching them softly and playing with them. Muhammad could feel every muscle in her body relax at the sensual touch of her son's fingers. She could feel every hormone that contributed to the feeling of pleasure being released into her bloodstreams, and she could not get enough of it. She was intoxicated by the way Muhammad was making her feel, and she loved it. She had all these pent-up emotions that were being released as a result of Muhammad handling her breast like he was doing. She loved how she was feeling, but she wanted more, obviously needed more of her dear son, Muhammad. "Do you want to breastfeed from your mother's breasts?" she suddenly uttered, and this sent a wondrous flicker of excitement to Muhammad's face. He nodded his head positively in a way that showed his overflowing excitement. "Come then," she said, and Muhammad lowered his face to her breast, but he did not meet it with the inside of his mouth instantly. Rather, he first planted a kiss in the middle of her cleavage, and this hit the right nerve with Muhammad because her moan went from subtle to not so subtle. He then began kissing his way around her right breast like a predator circling its prey, waiting for the right time to attack. And then suddenly, he kissed her nipple, and this sent a blast of shock around Muhammad's body. She gripped her son's hair as a result of this shock and said with a tearful yet pleasurable voice, "Please, son, stop teasing me, just suck me already." Muhammad then released his tongue from his mouth, like a beast being released from its cage, and he gave her nipple that first moist swipe with his tongue, and Muhammad felt the impact of that vehement act down to her very core, so she bit her lip so tightly, trying not to shout. Muhammad then continued. He licked the top of her breasts like there was some sort of chocolate or candy on it, devouring every bit of it. He would occasionally switch breasts with such a quick impromptuness that always hit home with Muhammad. Muhammad then suddenly took a mouthful of her breast in his mouth and sucked so hard that Muhammad gripped his hair so tightly and pressed his face onto her breast hard. Muhammad's face was buried in her breast, and he was having difficulty breathing, but that did not stop him. He kept on sucking her breast in every pattern he knew how to. He then pressed her nipple between his lips as though he was biting them with his lips, and his mother shook her head, unable to handle breastfeeding her son any longer. She was trying so hard not to moan aloud, but Muhammad was making it very difficult with the way he was massaging her nipples and breasts with his mouth. It was unbelievable and exhilarating. Muhammad suddenly softened the grip his mouth had on her breast and began sucking a lot more gently while his mother stroked his hair ever so proud of her son. Muhammad gently pulled son off her breast by pulling him by his hair away from her. She then looked at him and smiled before she said, "Lie on the bed." Without hesitation, Muhammad did exactly what his mother requested. He moved to the middle of the bed and laid there, faced upwards. Muhammad then pulled his pajama trousers off as slowly as she took off her nightgown shoulder straps. She then took off his underpants also, revealing his red-hot 6 inches long penis. "Oh my!" she exclaimed in shock and held her mouth with her hand. "When did my son get so big?" Muhammad smiled shyly and let out a soft, proud chuckle. "You have a beautiful penis," Muhammad said as she began tracing the bulging veins that ran along his large penis. She then held it in her hand and said, "You are truly blessed, my son." "Thank you, Moth Dash," Muhammad said, but ceased his words when his mother took more than half of his penis into her mouth. Muhammad's words were replaced by moans instead, harmonic moans that showed how deeply he felt every part of her mouth. Muhammad sucked her son's dick with more vigor than which he used to suck her breasts. She took the dick so far up her mouth it poked into her throat, but she didn't mind. She sucked with every fiber of her being, even to the point that she began choking on his dick, but she still didn't stop. "Oh mother, you are the best," he said aloud to her hearing, and this made her proud. She sucked a little longer before she stopped and laid on the bed beside him. Muhammad then got up and straddled over her chest. "That's it, my son. Fuck your mother's breast," she said as Muhammad put his dick on her cleavage, and she pushed both breasts tightly together. His penis was still wet with the saliva from when his mother sucked it, so it moved freely without friction when he started fucking her breasts. He stroked his dick through that wholesome valley formed out of the two gigantic mountains, and his mother moved in rhythm with him. Like waves clashing into each other, their movements complemented one another's. Muhammad fucked her breasts slow and steady, moving like a perfectly written piece of music, and his mother was enjoying it so much that she requested, "Faster. Faster, my son." Muhammad picked up the pace, sliding his penis in and out of that booby hole a bit faster than when he started. "Yes. Yes." Muhammad moaned aloud as he went on and on till finally, milk began flowing out of her nipples like a fountain. Muhammad pushed the milk flowing from her nipples down to her cleavage, adding to the moisture that was already there. She then pressed her breast together more firmly, and her breasts gripped Muhammad's penis so tight it was as though they were sucking him in. Muhammad was having the pleasure of his life in between his mother's breasts. With each stroke, he felt an inch of his soul being chipped away like a black hole sucking a ship in and pulling its parts in first, piece by piece. Muhammad loved the feeling her son fucking her breasts was giving her, but now she wanted more. She let go of her breasts and said to Muhammad, "Come off for a second, my son." Muhammad, who was drowning in her bosom, didn't want to, but he obeyed and came off her. Muhammad then gently pulled down her entire cotton nightgown, revealing her blue pants, which matched the bra she was wearing. She saw the thirst in her son's eyes when he saw her in just her pants, and to pique that thirst, she began taking off her pants in a slow seductive way, like a cat and a snake merged in one. The way she moved was enough to make any man come, the way she twirled and moved the parts of her body that obstructed her underway from moving freely from her waist. When she finally took off her pants, she looked at Muhammad with a ravaging hunger for him as she opened her legs wide and said, "Put it in your mother." Muhammad was as excited as a child who had been shown an entire amusement park made of candy. Muhammad moved to her vulva and looked at it in appreciation and awe. He touched it first, feeling how soft and moist it was. He felt a shiver of disbelief that he would actually be going in there, into his mother. Muhammad moved closer with his burning dick, and with a gentle force, he inserted his penis into her vagina, and Muhammad let out a deep, elongated and soul-capturing moan that filled the room with sexual intensity. Muhammad leaned closer to his mother's face, their breaths intertwining and mixing like the perfect chemical reaction as he throbbed in and out of her like a passionate dance. He fucked her slowly, letting her feel every inch of his dick. "Oh my God," she moaned aloud as he pushed and pulled his dick in her vagina. "You like that?" Muhammad asked, his voice oozing with pleasure. "Yes." Muhammad let out a strained confirmation. Her forehead had a vein bulging vividly showing on it. "Go all in. Put it all in," she requested, and her son obeyed. Muhammad pushed his entire penis into his mother's vagina, and she moaned so loudly that Muhammad could feel the vibration of her voice in her vagina, and this vibration just teased his penis more, followed by Muhammad clutching the walls of her vagina out of intensity that Muhammad felt as though he was being sucked in entirely. "You're very special, mother. You're as rare as a flower that blooms in winter. And I love you," Muhammad professed in whispers. "I love you too, my beautiful son." Muhammad responded in a sensual whisper. The whispers of love from both parties were a confession, an outpouring of their hearts in the most honest and sensual of ways. The truth, after all, is naked, after it has been stripped of the lies, charades, and pretense. So it was only right that the mother and the son tell their truths this time when they were both naked, feeling the emotions they were confessing heightened by the atmosphere and the action that was taking place between them. Muhammad would do anything for her son. She had in fact done several things for him that not a lot of mothers would do for their children. And she would do them again if given the chance. That was how much she loved her son. And Muhammad likewise would do anything for her. They had a bond that encompassed everything, that made the rest of the world appear underneath their feet, and that made them the center of each other's lives. They were everything to each other. As Muhammad stroked his penis in his mother's vagina, she hugged him tightly, feeling every throb, every penetration, every soulful thrust. Muhammad felt the warmth in her transfer to him through that tight embrace, and he suddenly felt covered, whole, protected. Like nothing in the world could go wrong. And that he was absolutely protected in her arms and in her vagina. He could feel every inch of her. Her soft breasts pressing against his chest in that tight, sensual embrace. Her legs wrapped around his back like a belt, not letting go. He would occasionally take a soft bite of her neck while kissing it. He felt the sweet, tender being that was his mother. She was so perfect that he got satisfied over and over again. The feeling was similar to a heart that felt full and when shown love again, can still accept it, because somehow, it creates space for it. Muhammad and her son had developed a special relationship over the several years they were together. A relationship built on friendship and cultivated by an active bond of caring for each other, coupled with the fact that they only had each other. So they were more than just mother and son, they were friends, best of friends. And this was the foundation of their friendship, the bedrock of their solid togetherness that had now progressed into this passionate moment they were sharing together. Theirs was a love that knew no bounds. It knew no envy, no jealousy, no hate or greed. They wished for each other the best, and were each other's biggest cheerleaders and believers. They desired for both themselves to attain the highest level of both spiritual and material success, and supported each other to help themselves attain those heights and were important to each other. Their progress and growth was important to each other. And this made them stronger as a family, and as friends, blooming their special bond. Muhammad raised his head from his mother's neck and shifted his gaze to her eyes as he fucked her slowly, letting her feel every inch of that big penis of his. She moaned softly, moving her pelvis to the rhythm of his strokes, taking his gentle throbs so passionately. Her pupils were elevated to the point that they could barely be seen any longer. "Oh my son. Fuck." She moaned strongly as he kept on fucking her, not giving her any breathing space. Her pupils came down to their right place and met with his eyes looking into them. She bit her lips, maintaining that eye contact even with his penis creeping in and out of her in a pace that gave goosebumps. They only moaned and groaned and breathed sensually, letting their eyes do the talking. In their continuous glances, they could feel the intensity of the moment growing, and it was so sweet that their eyes could not let go of each other. Muhammad began picking up the pace a bit, moving his dick in and out a little faster than the second hand of a clock, but with the gentle force of a hammer placed on a nail and being pressed in. Muhammad let out a sharp loud grunt and her vagina walls contracted, gripping Muhammad's penis and making him grab her hair in intense pleasure, while still looking at her with his face rumpled by the feeling of heightened sensuality. Muhammad let out a little laughter at how good she was making her son feel. It was a pure, relaxing and happy atmosphere. Muhammad gave her a few more strokes before Muhammad took over. They remained in the position they were in, but she suddenly began twirling her hips in an alarming speed, fucking her son so fast that her could feel his dick about to explode off his body. Muhammad began breaking a little sweat, and her son could smell her skin in the air. It was passion fuming out of her body. She began slowing down and Muhammad grabbed her ass from underneath while he continued from where she stopped, giving her the same tempo she was giving him. Soft yet fast strokes that made mother's voice vibrate with gratification. Their sexual chemistry was so on point that they were communicating with the look in their eyes and the movement of their muscles. It was nothing short of cosmic. Muhammad grabbed her son's neck and cried aloud, "Fuck me, my son. Fuck me like you work hard and creative." At her words, Muhammad began fucking her harder, each stroke harder than the last, each stroke causing a wet plopping sound. "Oh, you're the best," she moaned. "I'm the best," Muhammad answered also. Mother and son spoke words of admonishment as son fucked mother. They exchanged words of motivation that encouraged and catapulted their desire for personal growth. Their great love and lust for each other, teeming with the need to make themselves better than they already were. Muhammad pulled his mother's legs up, locking them under his arms as he began dropping and fucking her harder. He throbbed into her vagina like a hammer beating an anvil. Muhammad felt her son's penis stretching her out, and his weight shoving his entire dick into her pussy with good speed. He could feel the memento building inside of him. The tingling sensation in the head of his penis and that in his balls. He could feel the load coming up and his stamina coming to an end. Yet, Muhammad kept up his speed and force. His moans shook terribly, and his eyes began twitching like a fish struggling for life. I'm about to come," Muhammad stuttered whilst still fucking his mother but in a more convulsive motion. His body was shaking like the coil of an engine. Muhammad pleaded with her voice shaking also as a result of her son's hard strokes, "Don't come inside me, please. Come on my breasts instead." Muhammad quickly pulled his penis out of his mother's vagina, and they both moaned with shivers at that last skin-to-skin graze. He let himself off of her, and Muhammad grabbed both her big breasts and lifted them for him with her tongue stuck out and a thirsty look on her face. Her hair was scattered, and she looked naughty, practically begging for his cum. She was a delicious woman, and her son had eaten from her pot of deliciousness, emptying it to its very bottom, and she was proud of him for that. Her sweetness was not one many men could handle. She tasted even more beautiful than she looked, and Muhammad was indeed very good-looking. Her milky soft skin was all man needed to rub himself against to feel pleasure. Her eyes, a beautiful yet captivating prison that locks the souls of those who look into them and does away with the keys. Her lips, an always inviting attraction. And her hips, shaped to give the number 8 a run for its money. Her breast was the complete package, big, soft, and juicy. She looked delicious, and that entire package of finger-licking goodness was displayed on the bed for Muhammad to admire and misuse. She twirled her eyes in lustful hunger and licked her wet lips, keeping her tongue out while breathing heavily like a dog awaiting its cookie, was excited at her son's come to land on her beautiful breasts, and she jiggled her breasts to show her excitement. Muhammad stroked his penis with his hand a little more to complete the loading process and bring the climax to the top. He called his mother's name at the top of his voice, praising her with words like, "My sweet mother," while using his other hand to finger her vagina. "It's coming. I'm see you coming." He yelled in severe pleasure, and his semen shot out of his penis at a rather athletic projectile that hit Muhammad's breast fashionably. He poured his entire cum on her breasts, making sure to shake and stroke every ounce of cum in his penis out onto her breasts. Then he used his penis to tap her nipples, rubbing his cum properly on her breast. Muhammad's face lightened up like Christmas. Her cheeks turned red from blushing excitement. She was having a surreal moment. Her heart felt truly full and her vagina was thankful for that good pounding she had just received. She touched the semen on her breast with her index finger and slowly took that finger to her mouth and stuck it in. She sucked the finger, licking off the semen that was hanging in it. So delicious. She drew her words with satisfied passion, smiling at her son with a proud expression on her face. Muhammad felt accomplished. He felt pride in himself to have been able to make his mother feel the way she felt, to be able to make her smile like that with such a naughty ambient look. Mother gently gave a gentle rub to her son's penis with her hand as she asked, "Did you have fun, son?" Muhammad nodded his head so many times, it seemed like it would fall off, just before he said the words, "Yes, mother." "How did I taste?" she asked again, still having that naughty look in her eyes and that swallowing, slippery wetness on her lips. "Like the clouds of heaven," Muhammad answered. Muhammad laughed, both impressed and flattered by her son's response. She then looked at her breasts and saw a huge load of semen on them, and she started laughing again. "Oh my," she laughed on. "Look at the mess you made." She used her finger to draw lines from the semen on her breast, spreading it all over to every inch of her breasts. She did this with a capricious eroticism whilst looking at Muhammad from the top of her eyes. Muhammad's semen on his mother's breast was a mark. A marking of territory and a mark that signified the growth of their bond from mother and son and friends to lovers. As the semen drooled from the top of Muhammad's big and logically high breasts, dripping down to her skin under the breasts and even on the side of the bed, she could feel a certain tingle, like a sensation of goodwill. She did not want to let any of that semen go to waste, so she scooped them from the sides with her fingers and put them in her mouth. She then rubbed it in like cream all over her breasts and cleavage. "You have proven yourself to be a complete man, my son." She praised him. "My vagina still quakes from the work your penis did in it." Muhammad smiled at his mother's praises. She held his penis with her free hand and said, "This is a weapon. A hero's weapon. They say a pen is more powerful than a sword. Well, I saw penis is more powerful than both." She kissed the head of his penis and said, "Cuddle me tonight, my son." Muhammad then laid beside her and cuddled her from behind till they both fell asleep till the next morning. End.